Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Dr. Foley, roll call.
President Schultz, members of the board, please let the record show that all members are present.
Please join me in a moment of silence. Tonight we have a special guest, the Higley Air Force Junior ROTC is here to present the flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Order! Right! Arm! Forward! Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Anna, yes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-1. Dr. Foley, Superintendent's report? 5-0, excuse me. Superintendent's report.
President Schultz, members of the board, we start this evening with celebrations, and we have lots to celebrate tonight and some wonderful students in the audience. I'm going to start this evening with our first points of pride. We're going to start with Higley High School, and I would love to invite Mr. Alan Fields and Mr. Aaron Dilly up to celebrate their Higley High School points of pride.
Good evening. I'm Alan Fields, principal at Higley High. Very proud to be here this evening to recognize some of the people that contribute to our school. First up, I want to invite our student point of pride, Allison Ewing, up. So it says, Allison Ewing is a hardworking, charitable student whose philanthropic endeavors are countless. As a dedicated member of Higley High School Student Council, Allison helps plan and produce our student assemblies, dances, and spirit-filled activities. She participates in the Best Buddies Club and can often be seen participating in productions with our drama and thespian students at the Higley Center for Performing Arts. Allison is the vice president of the Kids for Wish Kids Club, and she is the president of Earth Club. Teachers and students often comment on Allison's dedication, work ethic, and her continued willingness to volunteer and lead, lending a helping hand. Allison will be serving as a student leader on the HUSD ASCA School Counseling Advisory Board beginning in the fall. Congratulations, Allison. We've got this, and then these. Okay, Allison, did you bring anybody with you that you want to recognize?
My mom and dad, Miss Baywick and Angie, and of course my sister. They all have inspired me and shaped me to be the person I am today. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so stay up here. All right, next up is our classified employee of the month, our point of pride, Jennifer Gomez. So we are incredibly thankful to have Jennifer Gomez as a vital part of our kingdom. Jennifer began her journey as a knight many years ago as a student and has returned to us over the last few years as a staff member. Jennifer is a constant light of sunshine in the front office. Her willingness to always assist and help families is wonderful to see. She greets every parent with a smile and is ready to assist them with whatever they need. Her customer service is impeccable, and she makes a connection with students and the parents daily. She's meticulous and takes pride in the quality of her work. Her energy, smile, laughter, sense of humor, excellent customer service, and willingness to always be there and lend a hand for her fellow coworkers is what makes her shine. We're grateful she's returned to our kingdom. Thank you. These. And then, is there anybody you brought with you want to introduce?
My husband, Victor. Hey.
Thank you. Our certified point of pride is Colonel Scott Vaughn. Colonel Scott Vaughn is the picture of professionalism. He is everything you would want and expect in an Air Force leader: respectful, confident, organized, experienced. However, it is the extra characteristics beyond that role that make him a unique and special individual. It is the late nights he spends making sure the activity goes smoothly. It is the early mornings he is here with a smile greeting groggy-eyed students boarding a bus for a competition. It is the personal knowledge of each student that makes him aware that he knows and cares for them. Thank you, and well done, Colonel Vaughn. Colonel Vaughn, I know you brought some individuals with you from the school. Did you bring anybody else with you that you want to introduce?
It's just the work family back there in the corner.
Then our point of pride for our parent volunteer is Suzanne Kamaj. Suzanne has embraced her volunteer role for the football boosters in a way I've never seen, and quite frankly, I'm astonished. She is in charge of our concession stand, a task that many dread. Instead of dreading it, she's relished it and turned the concession area into a 4-star restaurant experience. She spent her own personal money to make improvements and hundreds of personal hours cleaning and dusting. The football games were so popular in that area with bistro lighting, careful displays, and a unique menu for each game that we had to reroute traffic flow for safety. These games were an event, and she shows up 5 or more hours prior just to start preparing the food and displays. After setting records each game for customers, she then has serviced the needs of our sports groups throughout the year. She just did another spring game last evening, and our extracurriculars are grateful for our campus, and our campus is grateful for the amazing act of personal service. Thank you. Suzanne, did you bring anybody with you that you want to introduce?
Yes, my husband and my 3 boys. They have put up with all this and supported me throughout the whole thing. So I appreciate them for everything. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Now we have the joy of celebrating our Williamsville Points of Pride. I'm going to invite Mr. Fox. Is Mr. Stengel coming too? Nope, Mr. Fox. And I will help hand out. direct me, I'll help. Okay. 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 Okay.
Members of the governing board, Dr. Foley, cabinet members, audience, good evening. I am Dan Fox. I'm the principal, the very proud principal at Williamsfield High School. Tonight, we want to start with our certified staff. Coach Jason Karcher, who also teaches our video production class. Just a couple little words for Mr. Karcher here. Jason is one of our most dedicated teachers on campus. Coach is always a go-to person to complete a project, and even when I have a complex task, a few minutes discussion is usually enough for Mr. Karcher to take care of business. Coach imparts these qualities on his students as he preaches autonomy, independence, ownership, and accountability. Not only does Coach Karcher build incredible rapport with his students, so much so that he has alumni who still contribute to Blackhawk Buzz. And we're going to see the results of that pretty soon, right? Yeah, cool. But he builds great rapport with our football team. Jason is always logical, compassionate, consistent, and helpful for students. He strikes the fine balance between being an authority and being approachable. We're lucky to have you, Coach Karcher. You are a true Blackhawk. Dominate. Anyone you'd like to recognize who might be here, maybe outside?
To my wife, who's outside with my kids, because my youngest ones didn't nap today. So I'd like to recognize them, because I didn't want to break up the meeting, because he's losing his mind right now. So to my wife, so. Yeah.
I wanted to point out the dedication that Coach Karcher has. So yeah, thank you, Coach.
Yeah.
All right, for our next one, our classified staff is Jacob Watson. Jacob Watson could not be here tonight. He had something come up for him, which is very unfortunate because Jacob is an awesome guy and we appreciate him very much. But here's a little bit about him. Jacob represents the Dominate's core values of dedication and integrity. He does the right thing for all our staff. He goes out of his way and he recognizes the value of his quick attention to all details. He has never said no the entire time he has worked at Williamsfield High School, and his calm demeanor makes any IT emergency seem like a breeze. He is always positive. I've never seen him frown, ever, and is one of our most reliable teammates. Jacob is kind and personable, and as every single member of our staff has had nothing but accolades for him since he started working with me. Jacob, you are a true Blackhawk. So, Jacob, thank you very much. For our student, Charles Entley. Thank you, Charles. Yeah, here, I'll give you some stuff in just a second here. But Charles was named a National Merit Scholarship finalist this year. This is a tremendous honor and one reason why Charles has helped Williamsfield High School to dominate our own path as a school of choice in the East Valley. Charles is an exceptional scholar, as exemplified by his sterling academic record. He plans on attending Embry-Riddle University, and they couldn't be luckier to get such a highly performing student. The following are a few excerpts from his teachers' glowing recommendations for him. First off, we have Miss Krause. Charles and I have been together through 6 classes and 4 years of robotics, and every day has been an adventure. You just never know what he's going to say next. His passion to succeed is focused in summer camps and never-ending scholarship applications. He is willing to help others and ask for help when needed. From Mr. O'Hare, Charles is an awesome Blackhawk and demonstrates what dominates means. He seeks excellence in all his schoolwork. He is mentally tough and does whatever it takes to get the job done. Charles, thank you very much for being a Blackhawk. Congratulations. Here's a little present for you. And then do you have anyone here that you'd like to recognize tonight?
My parents. Thank you.
All right. And then finally, for our parent volunteer, Starla Taylor. Daryl, do you want to say this one? Okay, I'll take it over here. So Starla is the booster president for our cheer program, but so much more. She's an integral member of the Blackhawk family. Starla always goes above and beyond her duties as a booster president. Here are just a few examples. She personally customizes cheer apparel to make it more personalized to each cheerleader and coach. She makes goodie bags for the cheerleaders as they travel to away games or to their own competitions. And Starla makes sure that the cheer closet is always clean and organized and stocks with snacks and supplies for athletes. And you better believe it, right? They do eat a lot, don't they? She always thinks of other sports teams on campus and will prepare goodie bags for their special events, such as a senior night, and she does that without being asked. Starla has 2 amazing daughters at Williamsfield, but she is truly here to support all of our young people. When she attends events, she is not only there for her children, but for all of our teams. She's always willing to lend a helping hand and can be seen at many events, running around nonstop to ensure that everything operates smoothly for our coaches and kids so that they can have a best possible experience. Thank you, Starla. And is there anyone in the audience you'd like to recognize tonight who came with you?
No, one just got home from practice, one just got home from the game. Okay. So I'm going to thank Mr. Stengel because your support on campus and patience with the whole program as it's being rebuilt it's been felt. So he even went to Disney World with us. So thank you, Mr. Stengel.
Got you some goodies. Thank you so much for everything. Here, little. Yeah.
Thank you.
Here, we want to back here real quick.
Okay, I'm going to invite Mr. Fields back up to celebrate our next student champions that we have to celebrate this evening. We've got some more champions.
So can I get the state champion drill team to come join me along with their instructors? This is a highly decorated group of individuals here that represent our school in an extremely positive light on a routine basis. Routine for them because they're a group of high achievers and dedicated individuals. But on March 25th, they won the state championship for drill team, competing against over 25 teams from across the state. I'll throw in a dominate for my friends in red over there. But they did win grand champion for the first time since 2006 when the program was created. They had, I think, at least 4 other grand championships throughout the year at meets that they attended. They've been recognized nationally, some of them, for their achievements. Very small group of individual drill team requires these individuals to learn multiple positions within the drill team in order to be successful or be able to replace anybody that's there. But it's a tribute to their instructors, Danny Altop and Colonel Scott Vaughn, who was our point of pride. Outstanding program in our school, and we're very proud of them. Thank you. Anybody want to say anything? Okay.
Just for scope purposes, a lot of the teams we compete against show up with a yellow bus filled with cadets that stream out. Gilbert's team is 37 cadets. We have 11. You must have 10 to march most of the sequences we march, which means they all have to learn all the sequences, multiple positions. One student's out, plug and play. So it takes a lot of time, dedication, 0 hour and 7th hour, before school, after school, sometimes both. It's hours of dedicated training and practice and practice and practice. So congratulations.
There are some black ops who help us out.
And in Higley, the celebrations, we've got more because we have more champions to celebrate. Where is Mr. Edgar?
It's got to take some logistics. We're going to try. We're going to flow the kids in, one group, and we'll keep flowing.
We have so many celebrations and championships, we have to stage it in sections. So hold on, Mr. Edgar is coming so we can celebrate. And Mrs. Edgar's coming too. Woohoo! Mr. Edgar.
Gonna be the picture. Be the picture. Be the picture. All right. While they're all coming in here, very exciting spring season for us. Winter programs had a fantastic representation at the Winter Guard Arizona Championships. This is our WINS group, Northside WINS. It represents both Williamsfield High School and Cooley Middle School. We use it as a educational kind of recruiting group. Gives the 8th graders an opportunity to kind of get a feel for what the marching band will be like as they move into the high school, learn how to walk from here to there and step and play at the same time, all that stuff. So our freshmen, when they come in the door at Williamsfield High School, aren't really freshmen. They have some experience to it, and it's been a very positive aspect of our program. I'm going to turn it over real quick. Where is Ms. Huddle? There she is.
Hi, I'm Jenny Huddle. I'm the director at Cooley Middle School and Williamsfield High School. This is the Winter WINS group from both Cooley and Williamsfield. Again, we're super proud of their state championship accomplishment this season. And yeah, great job, you guys.
All right. Our next group coming in is our Cooley Black Guard. We run two guards at Cooley Middle School. They meet every morning before school. Extremely dedicated group of kids. This is, we have a purple guard and a black guard, basically comparable to a varsity, junior varsity kind of a structure. I'm going to hand it over to Beth Carlson, the director of the group.
Hi, I'm Beth. This is our Cooley Blackguard. They pretty much the past few years have been able to set the precedent in the state for what a junior high color guard can be. They come out and people are like, those are junior high kids, and for us as teachers, it's exciting to hear because they work really, really hard, and we're very proud of them. And this is Cooley Black. So our next group we're going to invite up is our Cooley Purple Guard. So this group of kids, a lot of them are brand new to color guard. This is, we think, the 5th or 6th year that they have won the state championships consecutively. So they had a really good season when we went to our first camp. Pam, Edgar, and I were like, whoa, like we were really excited. This age is really fun to teach, for me especially, because they're eager and they're fun, and they will let us try all kinds of things, and we were very proud of them this year. They had a great final run. Cooley Purple.
All right, percussion crew. And last but not least, we have our 8th grade percussion ensemble from Cooley Middle School. These young folks had an outstanding season. Very, very strong performers. We're very excited for the future. These groups that we've been able to put together now are starting to feed up into the high school, and it's bearing fruit. The kids have done an amazing job, and a lot of these students are actually performing with the high school group in the drumline aspect of things, and we'll grow into that next year and are doing an outstanding job. Super proud of the accomplishments of this group. State champions, great kids. Our percussion ensemble 8th graders. Thank you. As they head out, I just want to say thank you very much to the district for all the support that we are given to allow these groups to compete at the state level, and we are the largest represented district in the state as far as winter programs go, and it's something that's very positive for kids, and I'm very grateful for the support we receive. Thank you.
So that includes our student celebrations this evening. While we welcome you to stay for the entire meeting, we also know you want to go celebrate your sensational students or our points of pride. So feel free to stay, or if you'd like to leave at this time, that you are free to do so as well. And we'll continue with our meeting in just a second. What?
It's a great way to end the school year with a lot of recognition tonight. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'd like to make a motion that we recess into public hearing for the fiscal year 2023 budget revision number 3. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We will now recess for public hearing. Mr. Moore?
All right. Good evening, President Schultz, members of the board. Tonight, I'll be presenting the 3rd revision of the fiscal 2023 budget. This revision is required by statute and is the last revision that we'll make to this current year budget. As we've newly adopted, I have our presentation acronym slide for those viewers online or who those wish to come back and review the presentation. Jumping into the budget timeline, this slide should look familiar now as we've reviewed it several times throughout the year. We are all the way to that 3rd bullet there, the May 2023. This, again, is the 3rd revision for the district's 2023 budget. This is required by statute. This revision is revised back to our 100th day ADM numbers, so this trues up our actuals to our 100th day ADM count. As you know, the district's operation budget and capital budget are set from the state and are formula-based and based off ADM. And so when we reconcile that and revise, as we're doing tonight, we revise to that 100th day ADM number. So it's very important when we talk budget. That is the magic number, that 100th day ADM, and that's what we're going to be revising to tonight. Shortly in June, we'll be presenting a proposed and adopted budget for fiscal 24. We've already gone through the exercise of kind of tentatively approving those and recommending those. Just today, the state in-house, the Senate in-house approved the K-12 budget, and so I'll have those actual numbers this year. If you remember in years past, we were bringing recommendations based on tentative approval or basically assumptions from the legislature. But this year they've done the work and they do have a K-12 budget, so the proposed and adopted budget will reflect actual numbers this year and will get us off to a good start going into next fiscal year. Jumping into the highlights of this budget revision, the main highlights include our 100th day ADM, as I mentioned. So from December, our last revision to this revision, our ADM has increased about just over 17 from the December budget revision. Again, this budget revision aligns all our budget controlled funds, which are mainly our maintenance and operations fund and our capital fund. And again, this is the final budget revision for fiscal 23. One point of emphasis is that middle section there. We're increasing the transfer amount in this budget revision due to a couple factors. So the School Facilities Oversight Board is a state board that provides capital funding for school districts based on an application process and on greatest need. They are out of money for fiscal 23. And so right now they're taking basically applications for fiscal 24 in terms of projects that are being proposed and approved for funding. We have not got letters yet, but they provide letters basically guaranteeing that projects will be funded out of next year's budget. And so we can commit with summer projects. As the state knows, summer is our main timeline in which we need to get basically projects done and completed. So they do provide letters basically of commitment that they will fund projects, but they do not provide that upfront funding. So what we're proposing tonight is to increase the transfer of $1 million from M&O to capital to front load some of those projects until that funding is released on July 1 from the State Facilities Board. At that time, we would basically, on our next budget revision, we would reverse this transfer to move that money back into M&O as those projects would be fully funded from the State Facilities Board. So what that means for this fiscal year's budget is that total transfer will now increase to $9 million. I'll go over that in a later slide as well, what that looks like. In addition, we did, in reconciling this budget against our previous fiscal year budget, we found an adjustment of $283,000 where we undercalculated our M&O override budget amount. So the state allows, there's a statute, ARS 15915, it allows districts to come back and submit corrections to capture that budget capacity. So in this budget form that we're doing tonight, or budget revision that we're doing tonight, we are capturing that 283,000 in additional funding. So looking at this budget revision and what it means for our maintenance and operations budget, as I've alluded to, the budget revision number 2 that we did in December was adopted by the board December 13th, 2022. That budget total was $119,873,246. We're revising tonight to $120,017,446. And again, the majority of that increase is from those 2 factors, the increase in ADM, as well as the capturing of the M&O override budget capacity that was underestimated in fiscal year 22. That also takes into consideration the $9 million, the increased $1 million transfer from M&O to capital. So that revised budget from number 2 to number 3 has an increase of 144,000, but that does show an increase. If you remember in December, we did have about 30 students lost in terms of ADM, so we did recapture some of those from December to this revision. So the main increases, again, as I alluded to, is mostly due to the additional transfer to the capital fund. So in December, we adopted budget revision number 2, and that capital budget was $28,243,850. We're revising tonight to $29,243,855. Again, that captures the increase in ADM, but the main increase here is obviously that $1 million in increased transfer from M&O to capital to fund those projects that are pre-approved from the School Facilities Oversight Board, and then we'll reverse that transfer when we get to our fiscal 24 budget. But this lets us move forward with those projects with their commitment that they'll fund those July 1, but we do need cash to proceed with those projects, and so that allows us to do that for this summer. So that capital difference is an increase of just over $1 million, which is approximately 3%. And that's it. So really, just a recap, there was talks about doing a budget revision in April, but as we know, the resolution passed for the AEL, and happy to report too that this morning there was a resolution for fiscal 24 already. So that's a relief, knowing that we can go to next fiscal year without that basically limit over our heads, and we can budget and plan accordingly to our fullest budget capacity. So tonight, I presented the 3rd budget revision. Again, this is the last budget revision for fiscal 23, and that just basically reconciled up to that 100th day ADM numbers, and this is what we'll adopt later this evening, or recommended later this evening for the board. So with that, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
At this time, it's also appropriate that if the public has any questions, then you may do so at this time during our public hearing regarding the budget.
Board President Schultz, do you have an idea of what the amount will be for next year with the budget passing?
I just got those numbers today, so I do preliminary have those. I don't want to say those right now because I do need to run the numbers and make sure what I say is factual. But some of the highlights include we did realize the 2% increase in terms of inflation. We included that in all of our budget presentations when we were talking about tentative approval. That was one assumption that did come to fruition, as actual inflation is north of 7%. The other increase, there's some other increases that I feel like I can highlight in June when we talk about our proposed 24 budget, and I have time to digest those and present those actual numbers and what they mean for Higley.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Moore. It is important that we are able to do those summer projects, and so I appreciate moving the money for that. There's no other questions at this time. I make a motion that we reconvene in open session. All those in favor? Aye. All right. Request to speak. We value input from our constituents. This time on our agenda has been set aside for anyone from the audience who wishes to address the board. Those that wish to speak should have filled out speaker cards, which are due prior to the start of our meeting. Members of the board may not discuss, comment, or take action on matters that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-31.01H, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and a decision at a later date. Also, we ask the audience members to please practice proper public meeting decorum, refraining from either negative or positive responses, including clapping or verbal outbursts, to ensure fairness to all points of view. Those that refuse to follow those rules may be asked to leave. Speakers, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Thank you for your cooperation. Our first speaker is Tiffany Benson.
Higley Governing Board, I'm Tiffany Benson. As public servants under oath, we expect you to obey the law, respect the office of governing board member, and maintain decorum in public meetings. We don't expect you to aid and abet the exploitation of minors, but on April 5th, you approved Brain Pop as part of HUSD's technology curriculum. Students as young as pre-K are exposed to sexualized content and gender propaganda in your schools. There are only 2 genders, so gender propaganda is stupid. Male and female is all we have. There are no changes. And if you think otherwise, you're anti-science. Also, on April 5th, a board member violated open meeting law when she corrected a speaker about the GSA club on campus. The club is chartered as Gay Straight Alliance and run by students, but the parent company is Genders and Sexualities Alliance, and it's run by adult predators. Brain Pop's social media also contains discussions on Black Lives Matter, SEL, and social justice. This is CRT by another name. Since the fake governor vetoed SB 1305, the left is taking its liberty. But did you know that social justice and transgender ideologies are actually secular humanist doctrines? Secular humanism is a godless philosophy based on human reasoning and secular morals and ethics. It's actually a religion that's protected by the First Amendment, and you can read about this in American Humanist Association versus Federal Bureau of Prisons in 2014. Article 2, Section 12 of the Arizona Constitution says no public money or property shall be appropriated for religious exercise or instruction. So by adopting Brain Pop or any secular humanist curriculum, HUSD is breaking state law. I encourage educators to use their liberty to teach real science, real ethics, and use biblical principles to counter humanist doctrines. They're free to do this under the First Amendment and under Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution, which is the supreme law of our land. If anyone wants to blow the whistle on HUSD, visit schoolboardwatchlist.org and submit an investigation request. Lastly, the left likes to mock the word grooming when we use it, but it's actually a nice word. When it comes to board members and administrators like those in HUSD, I prefer the term pedophiles by proxy, because that's what you are. I'm Tiffany with Turning Point USA.
Our next speaker is Heather Bulk.
Sorry, that was out of place, we just realized.
Good. Hi, everyone. Good evening to our governing board president and governing board members and our cabinet. Thank you for having me here tonight. I just wanted to take a minute to tell you all how great the Fine Arts Festival was that we had at the end of the month. Last month, the art exhibits by the students were tremendous. It was well attended. In addition to art, we got to hear trash can bands and see orchestras and hear choirs, and the community all came out, and it was just really great support and a very positive event. I do want to thank all of the staff members and students that worked so hard to put that great event on, and it just really shows the dedication of Higley and how important it is to put our students first. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Kathleen Richards, Mrs.
I feel like I'm back at a forensics competition with a countdown. Good evening, board members. Thank you for all of the presentation this evening of all of the students. It was really great to see some of the extracurricular activities that all of our students partake in. I have the pleasure of running a drama club at one of our elementary schools, HTA, and it's been amazing to see what the arts can do for these kiddos in the classroom. And the way it can help both their academics and their social well-being as they move forward. The reason I wanted to talk today is I was listening to the radio and I happened to hear a podcast through KTR, which had one of our board members on it. In that particular podcast, there was a lot of vagary and potential misdirection of information, so I wanted to clarify something, because as I listened to it, I realized as a parent, I didn't necessarily know what MTSS is. And I wanted to take a minute to share some of the information in case there are any parents out there like me who were wondering, because it certainly sounded very scary in the 9-minute podcast, but what I found was actually really reassuring. So MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered System of Support. It is a tiered framework using data-based problem solving to support academic and behavioral needs. Now, I have spent many years in a classroom as well, and it is impossible most times to separate academic struggles in children all the way through high school from behavioral issues that they may display there. So what we have is a tiered system that's designed specifically to make sure that the academics are caught and caught quickly and treated with whatever academic intervention is necessary. Tier 1 is simply the core instruction. Tier 2 is targeted intervention, which some parents may know as RTI. In our particular school, my daughters have always had RTI, which simply has served as a wonderful differentiation of instruction. So for the kiddos that are advanced, they're going off with a teacher and dealing with advanced topics. For the kiddos that are struggling with a particular subject area, they're able to focus on that subject area to be able to find their strengths and be able to find their footing in that area. And then the third tier is intensive intervention. So that's where you have more parent involvement, although parents are involved in Higley from start to finish if your child has been identified as needing any of these interventions, from forms to meetings, all of these things. It's all readily available on the Arizona Department of Education because this is mandated by the federal government. It's not something unique to HUSD. When you Google MTSS, you'll find dozens of school districts that reference it on their own websites. So it is not something unique to here. And I was really disappointed that a board member would go on a show like that and represent themselves as a member of this board and present misinformation. So I hope that that will stop in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roy Morales.
Good evening, and thank you for having me here tonight. I just wanted to make a point of clarification. In my last presentation, I was here, and we were discussing about the GSA club that's both at Higley High School and at Williamsfield High School, and I had called it, I believe it was the Gay Sexual Alliance Club, and I was corrected after my speech, and was corrected to say there was a Gender Sexuality Alliance, and that may be true, but I just wanted to point out that, you know, we do the best we can with the information that we receive. I was actually going off of a poster board that was made by one of the students, and where they had an open house for all the 8th graders, and it did say Gender Sexuality Alliance on this poster board. So if anybody needed correction, that to me would have been that student and not me. So I just wanted to point that out to you. I also have a form from the NIH that has confirmed that it actually goes by both names, Gender Sexuality Alliance or the Gay Straight Alliance. So according to the NIH website, it says both. So you could probably use it interchangeably. So I just feel that when a board member corrects somebody who has a request to speak and addresses it after they speak and they have to sit down, they can't rebut, they can't engage in that conversation. I think that's an unfair practice. So moving on, I was looking at the upcoming proposal for your renewal of your membership with the Arizona School Board Association. It looks like that this contract is in for the next 4 years. And it looks like it looks about $5,100 per year for this membership. And surprisingly, this is a 4-year membership. So it looks like an all or nothing proposition. So my concern is that you guys go into this contract, the ASBA, you're committed for 4 years, you pay your $5,100 per year, and at any moment, could the next school board in 2 years, maybe in different opinions with the ASBA, want to back out of that contract, they're still on the hook for 50% of whatever is remaining on that contract. I see in here that, so in other words, you still have to shell out that money in order to leave the association. There have been many districts that have left the ASBA because of their close ties to the National Association of School Boards, which wrote a letter to the DOJ claiming that parents who go to school board meetings are domestic terrorists. And I understand the ASB backed away. They didn't want to be part of that. But that isn't to say something in the future may happen. And this is an opportunity where the district can hold them feet to the fire and say, you know what? You guys are doing something. We can't hold you accountable because we're stuck in a 4-year contract. Because if we quit, we're going to have to pay 50% of whatever's remaining on that contract. So I would ask you guys to see if their current contract allows you just to do the automatic annual renewal and just keep it as such. That way you can keep them accountable for their actions going forward. Okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. John Mason.
Before I get started talking, I just wanted to thank Mr. Tyler Moore for some really nice communications that we had a long time ago, and I just wanted to recognize you and thank you because I felt I put you under the gun one time, and I apologize. So, you know, I wanted to talk about social and emotional learning. Social and emotional learning is an intrinsic part of the district's strategic plan. I request that the district have at least 3 open meetings to discuss social emotional learning at Higley. This could provide the community opportunities to ask questions about SEL. It would also provide an opportunity for the community to give feedback about the district's SEL goals. During the last election, the two school board candidates who were explicitly against SEL received almost 50% of the vote. That means that probably 50% of the constituents are against SEL. This suggests to me that the district is not in touch with the values of at least 50% of the community. I make no personal claims about having a high level of social and emotional maturity. However, a district that teaches social and emotional skills must be willing to demonstrate those skills. Thus, I ask that you do the socially and emotionally mature thing. I request that you have open meetings to ensure that the 50% who implicitly voted against SEL to have their voices heard. I will mention my primary concern with SEL. SEL can be used as a tool to influence students' political beliefs. The district has already introduced politics into the learning environment. As I explained 2 months ago before the school board, the district illegally used public resources to influence the outcome of an election. I'm also aware of instances where the students are belittled by teachers for their political beliefs. In particular, one student at Higley was publicly called a racist by a teacher for being a Trump supporter. I find that disturbing. You know, I recently looked it up on, I think it was the Pew Research Center. Racism is extraordinarily, in my opinion, racism is extraordinarily rare in the United States. I married an immigrant wife from South Africa. She grew up in South Africa where apartheid was a problem. She grew up under the most oppressive circumstances imaginable. I've never had a problem with being married to a black lady. I've never experienced racism. I've never had an instance in which my biracial children have been discriminated against. So, you know, so when people start saying that Trump is a racist, they're just very rare in the United States, in my opinion. So, I really advise that you keep SEL and politics off from the school grounds. And thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda items 6.1 through 6.17. I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Latzenheiser.
President Schultz, members of the board, with your approval of the consent agenda, you hired some new administrators for next year, and 3 of them are in attendance today. And so I'd like to introduce them to you and then turn it over to Mr. Moore. But it's kind of weird. I want to turn around. I know they're back here. So first, I'd like to introduce Mr. Chad Cantrell. He will be the principal at Cooley Middle School next year. Chad comes to us with experience, as we sent to the community, as a paraeducator, a teacher, an athletic director, an instructional coach, a testing coordinator, an elementary principal, and a junior high middle school principal. Most recently in Apache Junction, but we're glad to have him joining us next year. Where is Pam? I'd like to introduce Pam Simmons as the new assistant principal of activities at Higley High School. Pam is currently the Dean of Students and has worked at Higley for the last 2 years and is now joining and moving up into the assistant principal role. Welcome, Pam. Finally, I'd like to introduce our new Dean of Students at Sossaman Middle School, Nicole McCullough. Nicole brings years of experience as middle school and middle school administration and is moving to us from Maricopa. So welcome aboard to our 3 new administrators for next year. Mr. Moore.
We actually have one more administrator that is part of my team here. I'd like to introduce Gustavo Padilla. He's our new Director of Maintenance and Construction. We'd like to welcome him he comes from Queen Creek. He brings 10 years of experience in the facilities and maintenance department, and so we're happy to have him to be a part of our team. So, welcome.
Thank you and welcome to all of our new staff. We look forward to next year. And while we're welcoming new staff, I want to just take a minute to wish all of our retirees that we just approved their retirement with the consent agenda as well, including Mrs. Patty Gleason, who has a special place in my heart, and her work with everything that she's done for the preschool program.
And I don't normally call out specific teachers that are leaving the district, but I just wanted to give a personal goodbye to a teacher that I worked with at Cooley Middle School who was my mentor and made things a lot easier there. Oh man, I'm sorry. Made things a lot easier there. And he's been in Higley for 14 years. And I didn't notice, but I found out today he actually attended Higley schools. Very cool. So I just wanted to say goodbye, Mr. McGee, and to all the lives that you changed. And it was an honor to work with you.
Very nice, Mrs. Anderson. We will be moving on to information items. 7.1, Higley High School project update, phase 2 weatherization and exterior painting.
Yes, good evening, President Schultz, members of the board. Tonight we're bringing to you a phase 2 update for the Higley High School project. The weatherization project was postponed and we are still working on pricing. Tonight, that was previously why we haven't brought it earlier. Tonight we do have the pricing and we do have a few renditions. I'd like to invite up to the podium the DLR group. There's Carmen and Simon, and then Chase Building, we have representation, Mr. Patrick Shepard. But tonight, again, in our presentation, I present an acronym slide for those who are watching online and want to review the presentation. Moving into the Higley High project, phase 1 update, progress is moving forward. The team at Chase is I wouldn't say at schedule or ahead of schedule right now. I've personally walked the building as long as several members of the cabinet, and it is amazing. You walk it 1 week and the next week, there's drywall up and paint. And so they're moving quickly, still shooting for that July start date of the start of school. You can see a picture here. You can see the rendition is almost looking like the building now. We're getting closer. I think, Patrick, maybe is there anything you want to add to the phase 1 update?
I just kind of want to echo what Tyler's saying. You know, we are on schedule or even a little bit ahead of schedule, which is very promising to see these days. So great success with our team and DLR's team moving forward. This project going. It's really been great. I actually walked it before I came up here for the meeting, and the site looks great. It's clean, it's safe, and the interiors are all starting to really pop with some of the finishes. So overall, it's going to be a great job. As you can see, whenever we can match the rendering and make it look like the picture, we know we're doing something right. So it's a beautiful building, and we're happy to be here and proud to be a part of the project.
So jumping into phase 2, again, this was phase 2 initiatives were presented to the governing board as recommendations from district to maintain the campus in terms of safety and security, as well as general maintenance needs that the campus was in well need of. These projects are being funded by the capital dollars. As you know, we do not have a bond in place. And so these projects, while Chase is on site, we felt it was advantageous to utilize them, that we had some cost savings in terms of keeping on board and achieving some of the maintenance needs that the site, that campus had. Just a recap, GMP 3, we brought that to the board earlier this month. That included the restroom refreshes, campus security and lighting, and traffic flow modifications. That GMP was $2.8 million, with $403,000 coming from the adjacent ways fund. And most of that, again, being a part of the traffic flow modifications. The restroom refresh, I'm happy to report about 3 different restrooms are near complete. I think we're just waiting on partitions. And so those might open up while students are still in school. And so that is just, again, a tribute to Chase and their team and working through with Mr. Fields and the Higley High campus and making sure what restrooms we can get into and keeping the schedule moving forward. So those restrooms will more than likely be opened again before the end of school. Moving down to tonight, so tonight we're presenting GMP 4. This GMP includes the exterior weatherization and painting. And so weatherization, again, includes a number of different things. So not only is it the paint on the exterior, but it's also weatherizing the building against elements in terms of water, wind, anything like that to basically preventative maintenance. And so it extends the useful life of the building. And with that, the School Facilities Oversight Board, the state, they provide funding for that to maintain your schools when they get to a point of that need. So Higley High did qualify in terms of some of the assessments that we had on the building for SFOB funding. About 98% of the campus that was eligible for SFOB funding failed the assessment. And so the campus really was in need of this project. So tonight, that proposal for GMP4 is later recommended on the action item, but that includes $1.8 million, with $1.1 million being funded from the state. So only about $600,000 being from the capital budget. So going through the math down there, so again, we started with a tentative budget of $3.5 million. Total project costs, including everything, is 4.7, but utilizing different funding resources in the state, that basically attributes $1.6 million in basically other funding that's helping support these projects. And so the true capital cost to the district and that capital fund is only $3.1 million. This would be the extent of phase 2 in the projects at Higley High School. I know it seems like it's dragged on, but it's important to understand that pricing and long lead items have caused some delays in getting you guys actual numbers, as well as working with the School Facilities Oversight Board and making sure that they have what they need to approve this project and basically that we have that funding available to use for us. With that, we do have a few renderings I'd like to show you. So I have a few before and afters, and I would like to thank Simon from DLR that provided these. I was kind of picky, and I said, I know I want our board to see like actual renditions of what before and after would look like. And so again, these are about 99% done. We're still working with campus admin to make sure this is something that their campus basically looks, feels, and wants in terms of colors. Those are the little variables that we have available to choose from. The rest of the package, the weatherization, is really just making sure that we get items needed to maintain the building and keep it weatherproof and basically satisfy the School Facilities Board requirements. So here's a little before and after of the gym. And so some of the themes that from way back in the community meetings were basically school spirit, campus colors. And so Simon and DLR have incorporated some of those into these here. We're also looking at lighter colors to make sure this can be sustainable. One thing to point out, when we do get state funding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carmen, but the state requires a 10-year warranty on paint and exterior weatherization. So we can ensure that the money that we're putting towards this is going to last us for the next 10 years. So coming to the next rendition, we have the 500 building here. And so you can see, I know the new building isn't done yet, but we're incorporating a lot of the colors and the themes from that new building to maintain campus continuity and make sure that all these spaces talk and feel and speak to each other. So you can see some of the dark grays, some of the blues, and then some of the light colors into there. We have the administration building. Along with this, a lot of the metal, excuse me, what is it called? The siding? Yeah. Okay, siding. You can see it's been scraped and just damaged from previous trees and et cetera. And so a lot of that is being touched up with paint. And you can see the rendition here, kind of really just freshening up and giving the campus a good look and feel. I think I have a couple more here. And so this is, I think, building 400 off of Recker. And so again, adding some of the Higley school spirit with some of their branding, the Knight logo, the shield, and incorporating some of the colors there. In addition, this project, we're also tackling the HCPA. We figure at the same time, this building is not been painted since the existing school as well. And so it still has much of the need as the existing campus. So one thing to note with this is part of the reason the capital expense is so high. The SFOB will only fund education space. And so what that includes, or basically the only thing that we are funding is the 900 building in the HCPA, and the 900 building being the field house at Higley High. And so those are considered excluded space in the state's eye. And so some of that $600,000 that is district cost are being funded to paint and weatherize those 2 buildings. And so one theme that we wanted to do with the HCPA was create a little different space, as it is its own space, and do a little more of a modern feel. And so there's the dark black with the lower pillars there, and then the metal being freshened up as well. I believe that is my last slide. Just a little timeline. Again, tonight we were asking for approval of GMP4, which includes weatherization and exterior painting. Summer, again, major construction across the Higley High campus. The traffic flow will begin as soon as we get the final okay from the town of Gilbert. They had a few comments regarding the initial permit, and so we're working through those right now, which is why you haven't seen major construction on that. Also, we wanted to kind of stay off of the current traffic flow to try to avoid any delays that there to the already existing campus. So we're, again, holding all those till summer. And then, again, July 24th, first day of school, we hope to have a majority of these projects either started and or wrapped up. We do know, and I will state right now, some of these will feed over into the school year. We're going to try to eliminate most of the items that have an effect on the students. So we're talking the bathrooms, obviously the new building. Those are our first priority. And we're going to work through the exterior painting. That is something we can do after hours on the weekend that doesn't affect the education environment. And so some of those may be saved or go tail into the new year and through fall break. So is there anything I kind of missed? Okay. Any questions?
Thank you very much. This looks great. And when the kids and teachers have a nice place to go, it feels better, I think, and with the school spirit. I just have a quick question on, you mentioned the town's comments on the traffic flow. Are those all addressable comments? Do you anticipate us still having a fix by the school year, or?
Yeah, they're minor comments, and correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, but the comments are more or less just making sure that we are taking into consideration all the requirements in terms of ADA and all the sidewalks and basically anything we're touching that affects the town. Those are the main areas of emphasis. And so they're minor comments, and so we anticipate having the complete permits back by the end of May, so I can hand it over to Chase to begin basically construction, demolition on that traffic flow.
Perfect. I know that's a concern for many parents and students, so that'll be great. Mrs. Wade?
President Schultz, my question is, does Higley not do like drama out of the HCPA building, or does that not count for the state staff and the jazz? You know what I'm talking.
They do. Higley High does not have an auditorium. As you know, they do use the HCPA for a lot of their extracurriculars, but it is what I just said, extracurriculars, and unfortunately, yeah, it's not considered an education space. Believe me, we stretched as much as we could with the state, but ultimately they're the ones who determined that, and that is what we're currently approved for. Those are the 2 excluded spaces that we will have to fund. Yeah.
Mrs. Wade would just like to add a lecture hall on there. Jeez. No. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to 7.2, Human Resources Quarterly ESI Report. Mrs. Johnson.
Good evening, President Schultz, members of the board. Before you have the third quarter report, and before I get started on this, I just want to say the preliminary board agenda did have inaccurate numbers. There was no other inaccurate numbers except what was sent to the board members on Friday. And through some mathematical error, we came up with the correct numbers, and that's what you have before you this evening. So the third quarter report states that we did spend an additional $574,519.82. And we are at the place where we will be asking in the action items, as you can tell, for an increase to this purchase order. So you might be saying, why more? Why more, right? So according to what we have, our records, and working very closely with ESI, we have an increase, obviously, in the dollar amount that we've been spending on our subs. We have some long-term subs, obviously certified subs. We pay our classified subs from this purchase order as well. We also have people that are retire to rehire that we pay as well on ESI. That is the mechanism that we use. The positive things that are coming out of this is the fact that we have very high fill rates. We are at about 90 to 95% fill rates for our subs. So our students are benefiting from the subs from ESI and the cost that the district is paying. We also have some folks who are on leaves, such as like a maternity leave, FMLA leave. So we cover those with long-term subs as well, driving up the cost that we're seeing after this third quarter. So in our ask for additional dollars for the remainder of the year, that amount will be $650,000.
Mrs. Anderson.
President Schultz. I had asked the question, I believe it was regarding the increase, but I just want to follow up with my question to clarify what I was searching for regarding employees that were leaving, taking leave. And I guess I didn't state it correctly, but the reason I asked is per our policy for professional support staff general leave, GCCA, payment for unused general leave, full-time personnel who have been continuously employed by the district for not less than 8 years may receive payment for unused accumulated general leave. So I didn't know if maybe that's part of the increase is possibly if they haven't worked here 8 years and they've accumulated some hours, a lot of teachers will try to burn it. And I brought it up before of addressing this policy, and we're not talking policy right now, but I would love to re-look at this because I looked at other school districts and their policy regarding timeframes.
Yes, and
I think
Tyler
you
and
said
I
it's
have,
coming. Okay.
Tyler and I have been working with Meet and Confer, and he can speak to the policy at this moment.
Yeah, President Schultz, Ms. Anderson. I know some of our Meet and Confer staff are here today. We've been working on this policy, and so we had a little bit of a delay with Ms. Martin's leaving. She obviously was a main part of Meet and Confer, and so this policy, we just had our last Meet and Confer meeting. We do have a red line version ready to bring. We felt that it was too soon. Our meeting was just last week, so it was too soon to get on this agenda. I do anticipate having that for a first read on the June 7th. But that was one thing that came to conversation. Like 8 years is a long time, and are we really incentivizing people to stay? And so you'll see in the recommendation that we're going to be reducing that, and then kind of incentivizing that payout scale a little more, in the hopes that people hold that because there is a little more incentive to have that leave accumulated when you do leave, whatever reason that may be. So hold tight, that is coming, and that will be soon presented to you. So.
Sorry, just so I understand, so we want to consider lowering the 8 years?
Yeah, I think we can have that conversation on June 7th. I just wanted to answer Ms. Anderson's question, but we'll bring that recommendation for a first read on June 7th. So
okay,
on that policy.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
President Schultz.
Mrs. Reese?
Just as I'm looking at the report, any idea why so much in the third quarter?
Well, one of the reasons is that we have legislation like ACA, Affordable Care Act, and we also have Prop 206, which allows an employee to have sick time, to utilize their sick time as needed. So the general leave that we're talking about, when employees need to be out, they're out. I think we're seeing a shift as well. When people are not feeling well, they're staying home and they're taking care of themselves. And that helps to bring down the sickness spread, right? So I think that's what we're seeing at this point. I really can't attribute to anything else at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
President Schultz and Board Member Reese, something else that might be, or at least looking in, because I know that we still do blackout dates, considering how much testing is fourth quarter. If I, as a former teacher, know that I need mental health days of, just taking time off or planning for specific things, doctor's appointments, et cetera. If I have blackout dates, fourth quarter coming up, and I need to get certain stuff, I will try to fit it in where I don't get penalized. So that could also be part of it.
To clarify, that's why their third quarter was so, okay, perfect, thank you. That's what I thought.
Because fourth quarter has testing, right? And other like end of the year stuff that they flat out are like, you can't take. So third quarter has less of that.
President Schultz, and just so I understand, so it's hard to compare, month over month when we look at the termination and resignation lists unless I combine them in Excel and then sort it by date. But so since I think you asked about as far as getting a report back to January 1st, now some of these have been on the list since January 1st. Is that it just keeps being added to? Is that my understanding?
No, the list is by the month of resignations or terminations that we have or retirements. So each time it comes to the board, those are current. Those are current.
Okay.
And I think in our weekly report, it was the same amount as last year, correct, at this time?
It actually was, we looked at the month of May and June, and we were at 82 this year and 100 last year.
Last year, okay, so less, sorry.
So it was less than last year for the May and June, April and May, excuse me.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Moving on to 7.3, Special Education Day School Report, Fiscal Year 23, third quarter. Mrs. Miller.
Good evening, President Schultz, members of the board. This is the third quarter update of our private day schools that I bring forward every quarter. With you can expect the final update coming at the end of the fourth quarter, as well as the request for the approval for the next school year. So this is where we currently stand. The amount brought forward originally is just an estimate, as this is kind of a moving target. We don't know what to expect. And as you can see, we anticipate staying within the requested amount this year. Questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Miller.
Thank you.
7.4, Textbook Adoption Presentation.
There we are. Good evening, President Schultz, members of the board. Here to talk to you a little bit about conceptual physics and just provide an update of where we are in the process of adopting a textbook for this course. Conceptual physics is a middle school course. It's a science course taught at both of our middle schools, focusing on the applied ideas of physics. Think like Newton's laws, motion, waves, force, using all those ideas in a real-world application. And so that's where kids get to really encounter these ideas. So that's the course that we're talking about for this. So on January 9th of this year, 2023, this is when we began the process. That's where RFPs were issued. And those phase one evaluations of the RFP submissions came in on the 16th of February. At that point, we determined which textbooks were suitable to go to that next level, that phase two. And this is where the teachers who actually teach the courses were given a period of time to evaluate the materials and use rubrics to be able to provide their own input and feedback on the characteristics and qualities of the textbooks. Those textbooks then went on display on the 1st of March, and they continue on display for the public. They're right outside this door, so anyone who wants to make an examination and a comment, there's a QR code that allows anyone to provide specific feedback about the books, and we'll leave those on public display all the way through the 7th of June of this year. So they're available during normal business hours for anyone to come in and take a look at those. Back on March 30th, we had our publisher presentations where the vendors representing the 2 textbooks that we have available came and they spoke directly to the teachers that were a part of that group and anyone from the public that was welcome to attend. And at this point tonight, I'm giving you the update. Here we are on May the 10th. But I'm excited to announce that next week on Tuesday, right here in the governing boardroom at 4:30, we're going to hold a community meeting so that any members of our community can come in and get a closer look at the materials and give any feedback that they have about conceptual physics, specifically about the materials that we have. I think I'm going to be able to have at least one of the teachers who teaches the course on hand being able to be there and answer any questions and speak specifically about their needs and the things that they look for and what makes a good set of materials specific to this particular course, which is usually taken, it's kind of an accelerated course, so for middle schoolers to dive into physics at that age and stage. And then at that point, we hope to bring back final recommendations, taking in all the information and input from the teachers, from community members, from the public display, and bring all those together with a recommendation for you.
Thank you, Dr. Treat. If they miss this meeting or don't hear about when the community meeting is, it's on our website, the information, and then also goes out in an email to tell parents, community members about the community.
President Schultz?
Excuse me.
President Schultz, the communication went to the entire community already, making them aware of this. It went out, I think, the last Thursday.
Yes, I believe it was Thursday.
So sorry. I missed the email, so I'm sorry.
Send
Just
it to
asking
you
when it was.
again.
No, it's okay. I have the information. Last Thursday. Okay. I was, yes. I understand why I missed it now. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
President Schultz?
Yes.
Was there communication sent out that it was on public display? Because I don't remember receiving that as a middle school parent. Do you know when that went out?
Board Member Van Hook, those were on the website as far as the notifications. We've had our process and our timeline as well as the rubrics available all the way throughout this process. So the notification was within that timeline on that section on our adoptions for this year.
So it was just posted on the website and not necessarily an email went out letting parents know that it is on display?
From March 30th, that was the notification.
The display from March 1st to June 7th.
I'm sorry. Yes, that was the notification on the website at that point that the public was welcome to and still are. They're still on display today.
So if the public doesn't know that it's happening and they don't go to the website, they would never know that it's on display, correct?
That's where the notification is. So.
Yeah, and this is why I believe it's important to send out an email like we did with the community meeting, because if parents don't know that something's on display, they have no reason to go to the website. They'd never know to go to the website and look at something. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think in most cases, unless a parent needs something, they don't visit the website. So this is the first time I'm hearing that there was a public display that's been happening since March 1st. So if we could possibly send an email out letting parents know that this is open till June 7th, I think that'd be really good because I'm sure most parents aren't aware. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Retreat. So parents have until June 7th, and then the community meeting is May 16th, just to confirm. Thank you very much.
I had a question. I'm
Oh,
so
I'm sorry,
sorry.
Mrs.
I'm sorry,
Anderson.
Mr. Chair. Will the community meeting be recorded for people who cannot attend?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes,
Wonderful. Thank
Vice
you.
President Anderson, we can work to make that happen for sure. Just like we record these, so.
Okay, thank you.
Uh,
And there's 2 conceptual physics teachers, one at each school, or have we hired more since?
One at each school.
One at each school, and they were the 2. Were there any other science teachers from other subject areas that?
Yes, we had one other teacher who is qualified to teach that course, but is not currently teaching the course.
Okay.
That individual's expressed an interest in the future and wanted to be a part of the process.
Okay, and were high school teachers invited to be a part of the committee, or did anyone from the high school?
No,
Just for the transition?
Yeah, no one else participated.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Last thing, and anybody can answer this, is when do we go to summer hours, just so the community knows the hours that they can come to the district, or when to look for that? I don't know the date.
Excuse me, President Schultz, we can add that to the email notification clarifying that it's still here, and here are our summer hours. So we'll take care of that.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that's all now. Thank you. Oh, no, I lied.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I apologize.
No, you're
President Schultz. Remind me, I apologize, I don't recall from our last meeting, when our community newsletter is going out, and is that something that we can put in it if it will catch the information send? And can we do it moving forward?
Vice President Anderson, we sent it through a separate email identifying when this event would take place on the 16th here at the district office. So please clarify for me what you're asking.
I was just asking, in addition to to emailing on information, can the community newsletter, I forget what we called it, the new thing we're sending out, would that be appropriate?
It's under announcements on the main website as well. So we can ask schools to put it on their weekly newsletters.
Okay.
They're all connected.
Okay.
President
Teresa's thing.
Yeah.
When we talked about sending out the Higley
That's
magazine
the digital thing. Thank you.
that she talked about in her PR initiative, or marketing initiative, that we would be sending, we're going to redo those and start sending those out to the community. And I think Mrs. Anderson's asking, when is that going to go out? And because this goes through June 7th, is that something that will make that?
Thank you for clarifying the question. So probably when we're talking about doing, again, those newsletters, they're going to be more like informational that isn't date time sensitive because they might be quarterly. And we'd hate for it won't probably go before the June 7th because that was part of the goals for next year to relaunch those as part of our kickoff. So this would be utilizing the emails. Currently, we use the emails and announcement in our website all the same. So when the emails go, they're also on the website. So we double do them. So for instance, if a school newsletter goes home, it's also sent through an email and on the website. That's what we're currently doing now for timely things that could expire by the time it would go to print, if you will. And that way it's more timely and it allows us and allows families to customize how they want to receive that communication.
President Schultz.
Ms. Reese?
This kind of another example of how are we going to communicate with our community that don't have kids in our schools? Because this could be information that other people who have kids attending charter schools, don't have, things like that. This could be of some interest to them, see what our curriculum is. Perhaps it could help, decide as my kids get into high school, this is a good curriculum, this is their path that they would be interested in, and just to be interested in what we're teaching. So again, we kind of talked about that before at our retreat on how to look at how we can communicate community as a whole, because we still have lots of families that don't necessarily have kids in our schools that could be interested in, like Mrs. Van Hook said, if they don't know something's going on, unless they make it a habit to check our website on a regular basis, they wouldn't necessarily know this is happening. So just another thing to keep in mind on how to communicate bigger things like this, even if it's just a small little postcard. Hey, textbook adoption, look at our website. Something to steer them to the website. Doesn't have to be long.
Was the, President Schultz, I apologize, was the previous textbook adoption for science, was that emailed out or was it done the same way?
President Schultz, Vice President Anderson, if you recall, we actually had a very similar conversation, and what happened is it went into the newsletters of all the schools, and this was a much larger adoption, but very similar in its stature, that, again, this was a one course. Last time it was the entire science, but yes, it went in all of the newsletters for all of the schools during that window time.
And if you remember, nobody came to check out the curriculum except for Mrs. Wilson. Was the only one that came and signed in and out. Yes, we peeked at when we went to the rooms and we looked at it, yes, but that signed in and signed out. So if this is important to you as a community, then take this time between now and June 7th and attend the community meeting. And also, if you have kids that are interested in physics and the district, then this is a great time to see what the program is and the classes that we're offering here at Higley. Thank you, Dr. Treat.
President Schultz, can we acknowledge our district-level instructional science coach, Kimberly Morton? Can you stand up and wave? She has worked very hard to take care of all of our teachers and our students, and today we had some exciting news. We went to Higley Traditional Academy. The third grade teachers showed us their ecosystems in their classrooms and were raving about how much they loved the curriculum. So it was a positive thing to hear that they're enjoying it, and that lady back there has worked really hard, along with Dr. Treat. Thank you, Dr. Treat.
Can you repeat what system that was again?
Ecosystems, yes.
What is it? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, it's Texas accent. I'm sorry.
President Schultz, Board Member Van Hook, we got to walk into the jungle, the desert, the Arctic, the ocean, and they had transformed their rooms with poster boards of learning all over, and the students could not have been more proud, and they were sharing. They wanted to share their work. So we happened to be there to hear from students reported of a graduate, and they had to pull us in to show us, we want to show you our science. So it was pretty wonderful.
That's awesome. I'm guessing there'll be pictures in our weekly report.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I can't wait to see. Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Walker. Moving on to 7.5, Student Code of Conduct Information.
Good evening, President Schultz, members of the board. Tonight, I come forward to present to you an update on the Code of Conduct heading into the 23-24 school year. So just a couple pieces of information, especially for newer board members. Just what is the Code of Conduct? It is our document, our public document that supports governing board policy JIC, which is student conduct. It summarizes the district's behavioral expectations based on both school law and governing board policy. And it serves as a point of reference for disciplinary procedures for teachers, students, administration, and the community. So last year, we brought the Code of Conduct to the board as an information item, June of 2022. That was the first time that the conduct document had been brought since 2017. So we conducted an external comparison, an internal review, and had a legal examination of the existing document. Our findings was that the document was relevant and appropriate, but there were changes that needed to comply with legislative changes. And then we would shift our focus to a handbook that contains the code of conduct moving forward, because there was lots of information that was in the code of conduct, but the denotation of the code of conduct is it's the consequences. We want to front load the expectations first and then have the consequences follow. So we're in the process, and I'll talk about that in just a second, how we're kind of reframing the approach to that. So the work this year, Code of Conduct Task Team was formed with representation from both sides of the feeder system, comprising of secondary deans, aspiring administrators, counseling services, special education, student information, and legal. The Cabinet and Ed Services teams met and discussed the document. We brought back items for discussion to the Code of Conduct Task Team, who then brought information back to their admin teams. The team met again, we reviewed changes, and then we submitted to legal for a final review of the document. The task team consisted of the following people, representing from all sides of the district, as well as different departments that have involvement, along with representation from Udall-Shumway for review. The findings for this year, as we did a pretty extensive review last year, there wasn't really a lot of information that was tended to change, but it does support our intentions. And the number one intention of the document is that it serves as a purpose to keep a safe and orderly learning environment for all of our students, support our teachers and our administrators and our families. It follows some sort of sequential progressive discipline, so it creates a learning opportunity for students. So our main focuses of this year was to maintain a K-12 articulation, so the progressive discipline is appropriate for students who are K-12 students, and so they understand and learn the expectations early, and then they can adhere to them for their time throughout the time in the district. We also focused on transportation, bullying and harassment, hazing, and then due process, especially for long-term suspension and expulsion. So the steps taken was to review the sequence of progressive discipline for all of our grade levels to better align them based on the input from the teams. We worked with the transportation task team for one, to be able to support transportation, to maintain a safe and orderly route on the bus while supporting drivers, while also supporting students, creating a learning opportunity, but also focusing on the safety on the bus. And then legally review things that are connected to legislation, such as hazing and bullying procedures. And then we also sent several members of the staff to the trust training on due process. Our next steps is to format the code of conduct so it becomes that chapter within the handbook, and that handbook will be presented as an information item in June, and then ultimately translate the document into Spanish, publish it on the district and site web pages, implement the acknowledgments in student view and parent view, and then continue on with best use and consistency training ongoing throughout next school year, and then repeat this process on an annual basis and bring back to the governing board any changes or any trends that emerge from the review of the document. Any questions about that one?
President Schultz, what is changing in the bullying policy?
The policy's not being brought forward to change. It's the procedure and making sure that the sites are following a procedure that's uniform across the district.
Got it. I have heard from several parents that of their kids being bullied and nothing's being done about it. And that's very concerning to me. Kids should feel safe when they're at school. Sure. And when a child is being bullied, it, I'm sure, makes them not want to be there. And I never want any child to feel that way. There is one incident that I noticed on social media today that I will share with you later this evening, but similar situation, a child is being bullied, parent has gone, to administration and doesn't feel like it's being resolved. So I want to ensure that whatever policy that we have in place, that the staff is trained on how to handle situations and that they do take it seriously when a parent brings forward any concerns.
President Schultz, Board Member Van Hook, me too.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that, any other questions? Good. Perfect. Okay. Moving on to 7.6, first read of policy JICA student dress, which is also Mr. Walker.
President Schultz, members of the board, tonight we bring forth a first read on governing board policy for student dress. Prefacing this policy read, this is a very polarizing and controversial subject. So we're bringing forward a policy review because the last time this policy was approved was in 2001. And so this was one of the results of last year's Code of Conduct discussion in June, and that there was some antiquated language and there's maybe some discriminatory practices that were outlined in the way that the policy was read. So we consulted with the policy team as well as sought legal input, and this was the result that we're bringing for first read was legal recommendation for an update to the student dress policy.
President Schultz, as I put forth in my email, the area that I have the most concern about would be the area that talks about exposes the wearer's midriff, undergarments, or undergarment areas. I often find that disproportionately impacts individuals who wear bras or bra straps, those types of things. And I know that we had some of the language in the part that's like crossed out, specifically like if your genitalia is exposed, your chest, those types of things. I guess my only concern as we move forward with whatever statements that we make specifically is I feel like the areas of concern that I have are people who are disproportionately impacted by that. Beyond that, there are certain aspects as far as like how it's enforced, and I recognize like for the most part, because I mean I taught here over a decade ago and the way things started and how they enforce versus today. Even if this hasn't been updated since 2001, obviously our enforcement has kind of changed with how style has changed, how kids have changed, et cetera. I just would like to make sure that we look at language that includes aspects of that. Like, for example, also like the wearer's midriff. I mean, we have stomachs. Like at the end of the day, I think some of the things that we do and how we write or how we enforce some of these things, I just don't see how, A, that impacts the learning environment of anyone, and B, there are certain aspects that like, I mean, as a female especially, and it's hot in this state, there are times you're gonna see my bra strap, it exists. So that's my only area of concern as far as like the things that we continue with that when we move forward, is that language specific.
President Schultz, Board Member Wade, this is one of the reasons why we put this on here for discussion tonight, because the policy is your policy. Unlike other ones where there are pretty legal pieces that are statutory, this one it has opportunity for there to be input on. My thought would be is that if we're going to have a policy, we're going to have to be sure that we enforce it. And so what do you want us to be focusing our time on? And hence, we're having this conversation with, here's an example of some updated language for a dress code policy. Like to hear some thoughts for you so that we can take that back to our policy task team and begin to look at the feedback you provide us to bring you a draft. So this is, as you know, not on the agenda tonight for decision. This is for discussion, being that this is one of your policies and this is something we want to, it was discussed about bringing and wanting to be addressed. And so let's have a conversation about the thoughts and concerns you have when you look at this so that we can begin to look at that and bring it back to you.
So piggybacking on what Mrs. Wade said is I also have an issue with the exposes the wearer's midriff and undergarments, specifically that it makes a female feel bad about their body and that we're saying that they need to cover up because of the way it might make someone else feel, and that is wrong. In 2023, we shouldn't be doing that. There shouldn't be a time when teachers need to make sure a top meets the jeans or looking at an inch to make sure that you're not showing a teeny bit of your stomach or part of your stomach. Right now, the style is crop tops, and it is very difficult to find a shirt for my 13-year-old daughter that goes past her jeans or her pants. I'm not saying we all need to be naked or that we all should come to school exposing our bodies, but it is more of a waste of time to me for a teacher to point out a woman, specifically females, showing an inch of their stomach than it is for them actually wearing what they're wearing. And in addition, we do have bra straps, we do have stomachs. So I have a problem with that part of the dress code.
President Schultz. For me, I think that kids coming to school, it's an experience of you got to wake up, you got to be there on time, you got to do your work, you got to, I think part of that is learning to be, I know that they're children, but learning to be professional. That you have to, know your environment. And having experience in the charter schools and their, rules on clothing, I found that some of it to be like way extreme as far as like, haircuts and things like that. But for girls, being a female, I think it's also knowing how to not put yourself out there, to be able to have, I can't think of the word right now, but just not self-esteem, but knowing that you don't have to show your body parts to be accepted or to prove that you're female. I've seen some students with their butt cheeks hanging out, and I don't think I want these girls to know that you don't have to do that to think that you're important or that you stand out for whatever reason. They should know that they're beautiful, whether they're covered or whether they're wearing a shirt that shows their stomach. I feel differently about being able to cover up a little bit and learning to be a more professional.
I respectfully disagree with that. I don't think showing a part of your body is not professional. Or having a little bit of your body is not professional. If you have your shoulders exposed, is that not professional? If I'm wearing a dress like this, I don't understand the difference, especially seeing the style of clothing that is out there right now for just people to pick from.
I would talk, President Schultz, professional attire is how do we expect our teachers to dress? So no, teachers aren't walking around with midriff showing, and they're definitely not walking around with their back end hanging out of their shorts. But I will agree that it is terribly difficult to find clothes that cover my body, which I have been left to dressing back in my day as I was as a tomboy. Everything I wear is sports shorts and a t-shirt, because that's the only thing that I can really find that fits well. This is going to be a difficult conversation because there's going to be disagreements on how we raise our children and how we find what is appropriate for our children, and then we're trying to make decisions for other people's children. What I want to point out is the statements that I've heard from teachers where I teach about how the adults feel uncomfortable with the clothes and the body parts that they are seeing on these children. So we need to make sure that we take that into account when we make decisions, whenever males and females are seeing girls with very short shirts and very short shorts and their busts busting out. I'll just stop there, but that's the point. We need to make sure we understand teacher professional attire. So when we talk about what's professional attire, let's go look at businesses and let's see outside the schools what's going on in businesses and what is their attire if we're going to address professional attire, and also how do the teachers feel? What are their thoughts about some of the dress that they're seeing around the school, especially when we have had instances with behavior between teachers, a teacher and a student, been an issue before.
President Schultz. I'm kind of back and forth on this. I hear everything that you and Mrs. Wade are talking about. The hard part is that we say exposes the wearer's midriff. And like you had referenced, you know, some things are crop tops. At what point does it stop? At what point is it too much? Because we don't specify, we just say midriff. What's midriff defined as? To then, if someone's wearing a sports bra, that could be, well, it's like a crop top. My midriff's okay. So I think the hard part is defining, and at what point, where does that stop? And it's always a fine line, like Mrs. Anderson said. Everyone in this topic's going to have different opinions, different thoughts, based on our own personal appropriate style. I agree. When I had my great niece and nephew, and she had really long legs, and to try and find shorts that were not booty shorts that actually covered her entire butt was very difficult, because she was skinny and she had very long legs. So I hear you with the style of clothes, and what's available out there too makes it a little bit more difficult on what we can find. And Mrs. Anderson, you know, that's a great point on the part of adults being comfortable or uncomfortable. And it's hard because this is a district policy, and we know the younger we are and how very innocent that starts, and it's just someone's stomach, and it's no big deal. You're getting into high school, and you're getting into the older high school, and Mrs. Wade, I appreciate how, or President Schultz, you said you just don't see that disrupting the environment. Well, when you have boys and girls and something could be potentially exposed, and hormones that could be disruptive to others, just on natural behavior. And so it's like, how do we keep not having them distract each other? So I think the hard part is that we're trying to get away from defining to a point, because teachers don't have time. Is this long enough? Here, stand up, put your arms straight down, or your fingertips, you know, does it go below your fingertips? And I think we're away from those days, but the hard part is that, what does that mean? I mean, is there a portion of the midriff that's okay, and then there's a portion that's not? And so this one is particularly hard, and I agree, it is definitely disproportionate to females. I know that people are going to be likely to address a female in this fashion than they would a male. Not trying to pick on any particular group, I'm just using it as an example. You notice your football players when they're wearing their football shirts, jerseys, game days, their bellies are exposed. I mean, you see the belly buttons, you know, and so are they going to be more apt to address a male like that? Probably not. So I think I don't know what the answer is on how do you define, how do you figure out the enforcement and things like that, and across the district, and at what grade level does it change? Does it change at a grade level? And the first thing I thought, and we've done so well at this, and I think it's just the timing. I have found it to be pretty amazing. If we were to take this to our students and ask them what they feel is acceptable, 9 out of 10 times they're harder on, nope, they shouldn't do this, and they shouldn't wear this, and they shouldn't wear that. But I would like at some point that we do check with our students and we're up here talking about what may or may not make someone comfortable or uncomfortable. It's their learning environment. And I agree, there's a point because you have adults there too, but it's their learning environment too. So what does make them comfortable and uncomfortable? So that's just a thought I would like at some point that we see what their thoughts are on dress codes and what they would find appropriate and not appropriate. But I have found that they're harder on their own peers than we do. So,
Mrs. Wade, sorry.
To add to what Board Member Reese expressed, I do believe that at the end of the day, when we give kids the opportunity to be individual humans and allow them responsibility and choice, that they routinely go above and beyond. And I recognize that people make mistakes because we're humans and, you know, that happens. I have had the benefit of working in multiple schools and in multiple states, and I have had a school that had a simple dress code of no gang-related, no drug-related, and violence, and learning went just fine. We have higher institutions of the same thing where you could arguably, you know, express that the interactions among students are far greater and more intense, and learning happens just the same. I find the message that we are expressing to our children to look at their bodies in a sexualized nature. We routinely have people in the community come up and talk about how they're concerned with our efforts to sexualize kids, and in my opinion, that's what this does completely. And for each individuals that have their own beliefs within your household and those types of things, nobody is telling you that you have to change how that happens, right? Because it is up to your choice when you come to the school to do these types of things. And as far as staff members are concerned, we also are adults and have the capability of recognizing what is a disruption in the classroom and what is not a disruption in the classroom. And with respect to time, you're right. I don't care what you're wearing as far as day in and day out. And when we have other types of things as far as spirit days where I came to school dressed as Jabba the Hutt, I go, what are we talking about with respect to professionals? Like, these are kids. They're not in a job. And I recognize that at the end of the day, this is the most job that they have, but we need to allow freedom to exist as humans and find themselves in the safest space that we have available to them, which would be that of primary school, secondary school, etc. And I think part of the reason that kids find themselves so judgmental of everyone else is because we are pushing our ideals and morals and judgments onto them in those circumstances. And at the end of the day, we are all now of the age in which we look at stuff and are like, my God, right? I mean, there were certain things that I'm like, we left that style to die in the 90s, and yet here it is. But that's not for us to say, right? I think at the end of the day, the efforts that we are making, we all have the same goals in mind, and to give our kids the freedom of being human beings and at the same time not saying that one person's body is sexualized and targeting it in that way, because that's how it always happens. And it always happens, and if we reaffirm it with these types of policies, it will continue to happen for generations to come, because that's what was done to us. And so my hope is, and I'm asking at the very least to consider, we obviously have time to make changes and assessments before we do that, but to consider where we are at and what our position can mean for our young daughters and sons as they progress, because the same is true for my son, in the same way that he deserves to understand that a person's stomach is just, in fact, their stomach. We all have them. Some belly buttons are weird, and that's okay.
Mrs. Wade, I agree with you. And well, Mrs. Reese and Mrs. Anderson, I understand what you're saying about making people feel uncomfortable, but I agree with Mrs. Wade that we have continually sexualized children's bodies, and that's not something we should do. And staff feeling uncomfortable is something that we need staff that needs more education, or that we shouldn't be sexualizing a child's body to make them feel uncomfortable, and especially females. But I do love the idea of getting children's input on this. And we could have a committee for everything and a community for everything, and we go over policies, right? So getting the kids' input on this at all grade level makes sense to me.
President Schultz, what about parents' input? I mean, I think parents should be involved in that too. You know, my kid might love wearing shorts with her butt cheeks hanging out. Doesn't mean she's leaving the house like that in the morning. So I think parents' input is important as well. But we also can't sit here and think that policies like that can't happen. I mean, it happens. It happens every day at my daughter's charter school. I mean, there's a set policy. Kids can't wear certain clothing, and it is what it is. The unfortunate thing is, no, we do not want children to be sexualized. But the problem is, it happens. Unfortunately, it happens. Not only by adults, but also by other students. How awful would it be if, because of, let's say we don't put a limit on how short a shirt can be, and somebody does wear a sports bra to school and whatever, and there's an incident, and something happens at school between two students, and who's ultimately responsible for that? The district? Does that open us up for a lawsuit? I mean, there's so many things that could happen, and we have to also consider that. We can't have teachers, again, measuring, okay, we're allowing 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, and, teachers are having to take out a tape measure or whatever. It's got to be one or nothing at all, and what option do we choose, and does that open us up for liability, potentially?
President Schultz and Board Member Van Hook, I would like to, there are a couple things I'd like to unpack with that. The first is, I agree with you that parents matter. And as you expressed, if you have a problem with what it is that your child is wearing, that is something that you should discuss in the home. I don't think it's our space to say what somebody should or should not feel comfortable with personally and those types of things. And the benefit of having that is it gives the opportunity for individuals to live within their own comfort. As far as the idea of what if it happens, I recognize that, and as somebody who suffers from anxiety, I spend most of my time in the what if, but I think we also have to be realistic in understanding that we cannot perpetually exist in a space of when other people decide to do action. And if you have a situation in which you say, what if you have people who have been the victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment wearing with very little skin showing. The clothing is not what's there. And if you're concerned with the idea of how do we teach to make sure these things don't happen, and that starts with us. It starts with us expressing that this is right or wrong. My child knows the oven is hot because I tell them no. My child knows not to walk up and take something from somebody because I tell them that's not okay. When we tell kids that their bodies aren't okay, we are reinforcing that aspect. And whether we intend to do it or not, we disproportionately do it for females versus males. And I recognize that there are circumstances of being uncomfortable as a teacher and what you talk about and how you do certain kinds of things. I live in uncomfort constantly as a teacher with the things that the students talk about, with the things that they are engaging in, because they are quasi-adults trying to exhibit adult-like behavior, and that is always and perpetually uncomfortable. We are trying to police a normal aspect of life and growth in a way that I don't think is reflective of what is best for overall equity and how we can maintain that same process. I literally exist in a space that if we constantly worry how other people are going to respond to, what is that saying to our children? If you have within your home, and any parent have within their home, that is not what we are okay about, and that is not what we approve in our household, that is fine. That is what you are designed to do as the parent. To say that we as a school have to dictate what that is for all of our students, I don't think is fair or adequate, and definitely doesn't represent equity. Also, I recognize the idea that an individual showing up in a sports bra, but let's also talk about, let's say you run track, right? And it's summer, and it's hot, and you're outside running track. We have swim, literally same things. In the classroom, I'm gonna go with two things. One, you're gonna be cold, and no, I will absolutely not turn that air down, right? Like, that's how it happens routinely. I've taught in Maryland, and some of the outfits that individuals would wear, and I'd be like, girlfriend, don't tell me you're not cold. I'm cold looking at you. That's not my space to say what should or should not be done. And within the home, you have absolute right and control to do so. But perpetually trying to avoid the negative behaviors of others by telling them that this is something they should police only perpetuates that negative behavior.
President Schultz. Again, we're always going to have some part that we're going to agree or disagree with. This is going to be terribly difficult to set, to say it can be free and open or set parameters. But the point of policy is to enable consistency and clarity. And if we say, like jobs say, this is our policy for clothing, whether you're a police officer, you're a teacher, you work in an engineering field or whatever, they still have their dress code and policy. And a policy, again, enables us to say, okay, these are expectations. That way we can be consistent with everybody, and we're not sitting here playing the game of you and not you, but this is okay, and we're gonna spend time measuring and trying to figure out every day what is appropriate for this person or whomever. So I'm with Christine, I don't have an answer for this, but the point of policy is sticking to setting it for everybody to follow and go home and dress exactly how you would like to dress, but I don't dress how I want to dress at my professional job. I can't even wear jeans except for on Fridays unless I wear my Bulldog t-shirt. You know, boy, would I like to wear jeans every day. But I can't because that is the policy for dress for the professionals in my school. And again, there's little room to no room to give for that so that we can maintain consistency and order, if you will, as we maintain an academic environment. But that's it.
Thank you. I would just like to be a part of a solution that doesn't continue to sexualize girls' bodies and continues to make girls feel bad about their bodies because of what other people might think or do. And that's all I have to say about that. Any other questions, comments, concerns? And we'll continue with this.
Yeah.
President Schultz, Governing Board, thank you for the very healthy and robust conversation. I think you represent multiple parents, and this is helpful for us to hear your context so that we can take this back and some of the feedback and suggestions you have, and we can decide who else and what else we need to do before we bring back a recommendation. Obviously, this is one that will take us some while to get something that I think that would capture the perspectives that you've shared with us. So, but thank you for giving us an opportunity to hear what you're thinking about this to help us guide this work on this next step.
And President Schultz, I just want to clarify too, I think parent input is important. I think the point, like Mrs. Anderson brought, I look at this as what's considered socially acceptable on our campus and in our schools. And then from there, parents dictate, like Mrs. Wade said, what's appropriate in their home, what's not. What are their kids walking out in and what they're not. We've all seen the kids who show up in school in one thing, they come out of the bathroom in another, because obviously they know that that's not acceptable for their home, but that's not for us to handle and police. That's between them and their parent in that aspect. But I do think parents' options are important, and I look at this as the framework of what we would consider creating a safe, socially acceptable campus environment, and then their parent goes from there. So,
thank you, Mrs. Reese. Thank you, Mr. Walker.
You're welcome.
Yeah. The entire time. Moving on to action items. 8.1, approval of the fiscal year 2023 budget revision number 3. I'd like to make a motion to approve fiscal year 2023 budget revision number 3.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. 8.2, approval of GMP number 4. I make a motion to approve GMP number 4 for Phase 2 weatherization of Higley High School project to Chase Building Team.
Second.
Questions, comments, concerns? I forgot that part.
Oh, my bad.
No, you're good. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 5-0. 8.3, I move that we authorize the authorization of the expenditure substitute teachers increase of Educational Service, Inc.
Seconded.
Questions, comments, concerns?
President Schultz,
Mrs. Reese?
I just want to indicate I am concerned on this, and it does bother me. We're almost doubling our original authorization. And our original authorization was already taking into account, we increased it from what it was already. We said, okay, this is what we learned from last year, so we're gonna give ourselves some cushion, and we're gonna increase it. And then, just in March, we said, you know what? We're gonna ask for another increase because we don't wanna keep coming back. So we're gonna try and give ourselves another cushion. We're not 2 months later and we're here again. And essentially, we're almost doubling our original authorization. I am concerned that we went over budget in third quarter and we're in this position that essentially we need to approve this because we're over. I mean, we've exceeded. That's concerning to me. I would like to ask, I mean, ESI is not going away. We're going to have subs. It's an ongoing thing. That we anticipated some inflation, obviously. We couldn't anticipate for how much, because we had this conversation where like everything's going to go up. We know that it had started. We couldn't tell how much. But I would like that we look at this all the way around, multifaceted. What are we spending? How are we spending it? Is there any other alternative solutions? And I know we look at that all the time, and it's on your mind as well. As well as how do we address the amount of absences that we're having? And I know that some have to happen. I get it. I know people go on long-term leave, maternity leave, medical leave. But we also can't operate in this fashion. We do need our employees to show up. We have, our kids are coming whether they are or not. And so I'm just asking that if we're having some repeated attendance issues, that those are being addressed, because that is costing the district. I'm not saying we are or not, but to look at it multifacetedly, that where are we, why are we here, and what can we do for the future? I agree with this, and we increased the sub-budget. We don't want our teachers to have to use their prep time and things like that. We want to be able to provide subs and have those for kids. But like I said, this is bothersome to me that we are at this end of the school year, we're doubling all of less than $50,000. We're doubling our initial budget that we had for this. And we just approved an increase 2 months ago. So I just wanted to say that and just ask that. I know you guys think about it too, but just please, let's look and see what alternatives we can do, how we can maybe better plan, and see what we can do with that. So.
And to that point, that's kind of why I asked earlier about lowering the 8 years of service, because I feel like if we lower it, we might be in a worse situation because people with less years of service might decide to take, yeah. So we need to think about that when it comes time to deciding whether we lower that years of service. Sadly, it happens.
Thank you, Mrs. Reese. I agree with you. Yeah, Mrs. Wade?
President Schultz, I have two things. One, I don't think it's going to solve the concern. It's just out of curiosity. Of our long-term subs, not for medical leave, maternity leave, those kinds of things, how many positions are we filling with long-term subs because we don't have a certified teacher to be in that position, if any? Like, because that would come out of the same fund. Again, it would be a smaller amount in general, I recognize, and ultimately we would still have to pay the budget because if it's not from the sub, it's salary, but.
To my knowledge, there are none.
Okay. And then the other thing for the 8 years, just for clarify before we go forward, and I recognize it's not something for today. The idea behind that is if I'm leaving and I know that I'm leaving and I'm less than 8 years and I have so many hours saved up, then I just start burning my days. Because when I leave the district, I don't get paid out for them. So for example, I left after teaching 4 years, and in that 4 years, with the exception when I went on maternity leave with my son because he came 2 months early, I never took a day. And I lost all of that time. So that was what Mrs. Anderson's question previously was, is if you know that you are leaving the district for whatever reason, and you know that you're not getting paid out for days you earn, you take those days. And that could be what her question was referring to earlier.
We will discuss that on June 7th. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, or any opposed? 5-0. I move that we approve I make a motion to approve 8.4 ratify payroll and expense vouchers.
Second.
Christina? Questions, comments, concerns? All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to 8.5, I make a motion to approve ASBA policy services renewal.
Second.
Second. Okay, questions, comments, concerns?
President Schultz. I do have a concern with renewing the contract for 4 years. I was aware that Queen Creek uses a different system. What I'm not aware is whether that allows them to do annual renewals. I would like to see other options, and if there's a cost savings potentially with a different company. So with that concern and not having the ability to do it annually, if we decide within the next 4 years to end the contract, then they get to keep 50%. I don't like that.
President Schultz, Board Member Van Hook, we don't either. One of the things that we did, you'll notice that I received this back in March, and immediately they start sending you a contract. Sign, sign, sign. I said, no, we're going to take this to the board. We have met with the model policy group. They're still in the beginning stages of this. We're looking at potentially moving over to a different platform, but there's lots of parts and pieces. As you know, we use both advisories as we are looking at that to bring recommendations to you. One of the components that this holds is board docs. docs. We reached out to, this includes our ability to keep our platform. If you go away from that, you have to do board docs separately, which adds an additional cost. So we reached out to ASBA to determine whether or not they would give us something less than 4 years, and the answer was a resounding no. So we did explore that, which is one of the reasons the delay in bringing it back, because this was the next board meeting since we heard back from them, that they would not offer us a single year. So the issue is that we are not, we do not feel that we are ready to drop everything board docs. We have been working so hard to go through those policies and look at both advisories to bring the very, very best one and get them good. Our feeling was until we see that this other one is functions the way we want it to, we don't want to step away from the format. We have a real need here in Higley. We like to Higleyize things. So one of the things we've been bringing is the policy advisories from both sides, looking at them, looking at other examples, hearing feedback from those who are closest to it, and bringing it to you. And either we keep the copyright or we don't. At this moment, this is the only option we have with ASBA, and as a team, didn't feel we were ready to step away from it and weren't able to negotiate. They don't give you a one-year option.
President Schultz, so by saying you're using both, does that mean you're using the same one that Queen Creek is using as well?
We receive policy advisories from both groups. Because we want both, and they're written a little bit differently. Both of them utilize lawyers. Both of them are structured a little bit differently. Some are more lawyer-friendly, some are more practitioner-friendly, and we like to have both examples so that when we look at it as a team, we can determine how we want to. If we want to modify or choose one over the other, we do. It's very inexpensive to just receive the advisories, and so we use both.
For me, I think it's silly that, they take state law and put it into their own words and copyright it, and then we adopt it as policy. I mean, it's state law, so I feel like we have to follow it no matter what, whether we adopt it or not. So when it comes to that, when you would, let's say, dress code policy, so when you compare one to the other, how different is it?
It depends on the policy, and I will tell you that some are more updated than others. Model policy is still also being developed, and when we met with them, we also met with them, I think in March, end of March, middle of March, February, March, we met with them, and they are still finishing parts and pieces, so we couldn't see all of them, and so some of them adopted and rolled over. Our feeling at this time was we like to utilize both examples because sometimes they're very similar and sometimes they're very different, and there's different perspectives depending upon the group who's recently reviewed them. The model policy group, because they're going through all of them, are probably more current, and they're using more of more lawyer perspective, and ASBA is doing the same. You heard last week when we had our retreat, you heard Chris talk about, one of the things ASBA had was they had missed an update in an advisory that's going to cause some districts to have to update their policies. This is something we're constantly doing, and we try really hard to stay on top of it. So again, we like having the resources to bring the very best one to it. Anytime we modify either one of them, many of ours have copyrights on them and many of them don't. We remove them. We have an attorney review it one more time to make sure before we bring it to you. Some of the policies are pretty straightforward as far as the law. Some, like dress code, for just example, there's multiple interpretations and recommendations depending upon who was part of creating the policy advisory for the district.
And is it possible to start getting that information from, I forget the name of it, the one that Queen Creek uses, but to be able to get information from them, maybe if we did decide to switch to them, would they consider kind of paying for our fee to move away from ASBA? If we can look into those and see what the numbers are and if it makes sense. So if we do decide to move to them, that, if they're able to pay for our fee with ASBA, that we could potentially move even before the 4 years is up.
I think that we have been in conversations with Jen McLennan, who's moved over to the model policy group in her team. We've met with them. We are also, because we're kind of with ASBA, right now our goal for us as our team is to make sure our policies are as strong as possible and they are as updated as possible. That was something that as a new leadership team we inherited that was not as comprehensive and as up to date we had hoped. So we literally are going through section by section, and we are all about providing the best product and resources. I don't have the answers to whether or not they'd be willing to pay it off for us, but I know they're willing to work with us because they're going to help us audit what we have to determine our biggest priorities to come for updates in some of those policies that haven't been touched for a while, for instance, dress code. So more to come. The issue is at this moment, we aren't willing to step away from the platform we have as we're doing this important work with both policy advisories, and we're only offered a 4-year contract. We have email exchanges back and forth with them, and they basically said it wasn't an option.
Thank
We
you.
made phone calls as well, tried again, and it wasn't an option.
You mentioned board docs would be a separate cost. What is that cost?
Board Docs at this time, Board Docs is the platform that ASBA
Sure.
uses for their policy, and
Yeah.
it would be it's a separate, we'd have to pay like a subscription
Okay.
if we wanted to continue using Board Docs, or you can choose other platforms. So my thought would be before we would ever make a suggestion to stop what we are doing, we keep all of our policy work going. Wherever we choose to host it or house it is a platform issue, and I think we bring in and have the vendors show it to the governing board to help make decisions as when we get closer to that point, and we feel comfortable to go away from what we have to what we want to move toward. So at this moment, we are paralleling both platforms. We have one platform, we have Board Docs. We're using the advisories from ASBA, but we're also using the advisories as a resource from the trust.
So we don't know what board docs would cost us separately. As a
I don't have it this, I know it's not free. I know
Sure.
that there's a cost to it. I do not have the exact amount of what Board Docs would be by itself, but if we chose to continue to platform in Board Docs, we would end up needing to pay for that separately.
And what's the cost of the program, the other program, the Queen Creek program, the trust?
The model policy, I don't have that
The
number.
model policy we're piloting right now for $1,000.
Yeah,
$1,000 a year?
just for the advisories.
Okay. But we don't know what their full program would be. Is it year to year?
Yeah, that's a year-to-year agreement, and yeah, currently that's the only, I think it's just 1,000, so from year to year, so for that service, so.
So if I'm hearing correctly, basically we're in a tight space, given timelines of current things, but with valid concerns as far as cost and those types of things at the very least to look into going forward. I mean, in terms of like, what would board docs cost us when you evaluate this, the aspect of that. I think another benefit, at least being part of one of these, is because as these groups can lobby directly to state legislatures, they're more aware of certain things that will pass or won't pass sometimes as far as like giving us heads up or those types of things. So I mean, at the very least, going forward to look into cost is smart to do.
You're fine. Quickly, or when is our deadline to approve the renewal?
Our thing expires through June 30th. So
Okay.
if you wanted to, and again, they send the renewal to you in March. We probed back, we're only given, the only option is a 4-year. I mean, we have 2 additional meetings where if we wanted to bring back additional information on what is the cost of board docs separately, the issue is to launch this happens overnight. I mean, to launch this doesn't happen overnight, and I just don't want us to not have our platform or our policies at our fingers, particularly when we're working so hard to get them in really good order.
President, where's somebody going? I said a quick question. Where are you going to go?
I
Yeah, I'll
did
wait.
have a quick question. So, actually, I'm going to let you go ahead, and then I just lost my train of thought.
if this is going to get tabled or pushed to another meeting, I want to ask this question, and you don't have to answer today, but I would love to know your professional opinion. You're the superintendent. What is your opinion? Why would you advocate for ASBA? Why would you want to keep it?
I appreciate you asking the question. The reality is I have a team that's working very, very hard to update these policies and to get the content of what is in the policies up to date. We've been working really hard to make sure we had a lot of policies that we inherited where there was no additional regulations or exhibits or artifacts. We have policies, as you know, has been a priority in our strategic plan, where processes and procedures, you've heard that theme over and over and over again. Well, that's because we have policies that aren't being implemented consistently all over the place because there was no regulation, training, and follow-through. I have been more worried about the quality and caliber of the implementation of the policies and getting them up to date rather than what platform we want to use. This is a time-intensive process. Hearing just our conversation, let's use the dress code as an example. If we decide to branch out our working task teams to involve parents, teachers, children, students, to get things done and get them done in time, trying to learn a whole new system and how we access those things in literally months worth of time before we start school would be a real challenge. I feel like our policies, the quality and caliber of what is in the policies is more important to me at this moment than because I'm using ASBA policy advisories and model policies. I want to be able to just keep us in board docs and the platform for a while so we can get them right. But I also understand the concern about the cost for 4 years if we want to shift them. But when we're talking about what is my recommendation, I think you'll be putting your team in an entirely terrible situation to try and launch a whole new model policy platform. All we'll be doing is organizing and formatting our existing old outdated policies into this new format. And to me, the thought would be I would rather us, if we're going to make that shift, have the policies in great order and feel really good about it. So again, our team will respond to what the governing board decides and wants to do. I will tell you that the timeline is not ideal, and yet the contract for 4 years isn't either. Is there an option to help incentivize us? You know, the hard part is I have found with working with other entities, they really, that for profit, our ability to negotiate is limited to what they're willing to agree to do. Even when I tell them our governing board wants this, they will appreciate that perspective, but may not always do it. I would say that if we try and do this overnight, we're going to end up with a real hassle.
I appreciate that, and for being so open and honest. I guess it wouldn't hurt for somebody to reach out to Queen Creek and see what that entailed for them, because they were, I think, because at least when I went to their website, it was fairly recent that it happened. It was just done. I would love to know what that entailed for them, and how long and how difficult was it, and ask their staff and Terry Berry.
Are they still using board docs? Do you know?
No, I don't think so.
They're doing a different platform.
It looks different, it feels different, yeah. I don't think it's Word docs. But forgive me if I'm wrong, I'll look right now.
Well, my understanding is Queen Creek moved completely away from ASBA, not only board docs, but they cut ties completely. I would like to know, I mean, if we can, I guess, I'd like to, I don't know, can I make a motion? I'd like to make a motion to table this for the next meeting, and hopefully we can get some answers as far as what it would cost to have a subscription to board docs with a new company, if the new company is willing to buy us out of, if we were to go with ASBA and decide we're going to move, if they'd be willing to do it, they'd probably say no, because they'd probably want us to go directly with them, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And if we can have all that detail, and then we can make a decision at that time. And now, you said it would be difficult because it doesn't happen overnight. Now, what would change since we already have access? Wouldn't that access just continue if we signed the new contract?
My thought would be is if we don't have the other system already up and ready to go and had been organized and had time to transfer it all over, to lose access to our system now with all of our policies in there because we didn't renew the subscription would be a problem. Because right now, Board Docs holds all of our policies and our regulations and things, so that if the transition time to the new platform with all those other pieces couldn't happen in time, I wouldn't want us to go in as we're starting the school year to not have immediate access to our new policy manual. Because this will be a very time-intensive process, and it'll also require a lot of training with our administrators and everything about where we go, how we access, how we find that. So again, it's just a matter of making a big shift quickly overnight.
And if possible, can we get like maybe screenshots of what that new system would look like compared to Board Docs?
Yes.
Thank you.
I was going to say, we have a.
Yeah, we have a motion on the table, so we need to have a second before we can move to table it. I'll second the motion to table it for the next meeting. Any other questions in the middle? Okay. Yes, question, comment?
Yeah, I was going to say I have some questions
Yes.
too. I was just going to ask, I mean, obviously she covered a lot of the same questions, but for me, if it could just be a side-by-side comparison, what services, I mean, we get more than just policies from ASBA. Like, what does our membership cover? What services and everything does that cover? And what they offer? And then with this other company, is it just policy? What services do they offer? The price comparison. And then there are some other aspects to it. There's just so much. Because the law conference is still very good, I still think our administration needs to attend the ASBA Law Conference. You pay non-member prices, which are much greater. So, I mean, if you can look at that, I mean, even though we pay to attend the law conference and the new board member training and the annual conference, the non-member price is much greater. So if we can just kind of get estimates. I know that's a lot of work. I know it's a bad time of year because we have so much going on. But these are all questions I think that help answer where do we go?
President Schultz, realistically, Dr. Foley, is this information something that because if it took as long as it did to get some of that information back from the ASBA, I think something else we need to keep in mind is any other program that we switch to is still going to have a cost. I get that we pay $1,000 for the trust one out of Queen Creek, but that's because we only have a portion of it, not the full entity of different things. And so, like, I recognize that the cost of what they charge and the nature of what it is, I don't envision the ASBA being so disproportionately overcharged because these other programs exist, right? Like, I mean, and that's the nature of a free market, is the idea that you're paying for certain programs, and if other things that exist that can do the same stuff, what is it that we're paying for? And I recognize that the timeline is really the biggest concern, and ultimately, there is more than just financial cost if we completely implode what decision it is that we're making without, and I don't personally at the present moment in time feel comfortable enough making a decision that might have consequences or ramifications that we can't foresee in the next year because we're trying to get it done in a month, and I recognize that that's not by choice how we are at this timetable. And so I guess my concern is we are making efforts to move away from something to go towards something else that is equally going to cost, and some of that cost is also time and hours and manpower in order to do the same thing. It's further meetings of policies that we've already adapted that we have to routinely do again. And so it's more than just the financial aspect of some of these things. So my question is, this stuff that we're requesting to get, is it feasible to get a comprehensive thing in time for us to be able to make this decision before our contract runs out so we are not getting ourselves in trouble? Or is the long-term safety might be spending slightly more in the interim for the next 4 years? And I recognize the 4-year contract's not great. There's nothing we can do about that. It's like Verizon. Every time I tell them I hate how much they charge me, they know I need them more than they need me kind of deal. So I just want to make sure that in our efforts to do this, we're not hastily making a decision to try to save cost, and what we're saving is merely hundreds of dollars instead of thousands at the grand scheme of things. That's only going to cost each one of us, the cabinet, and all of our staff more hours later, because that still has a financial cost to it.
I appreciate that perspective. I think what we will do, obviously, when you're at the mercy of vendors and you're going to be asking questions, we'll get back what information we have as comprehensively as possible. I think that the amount of man hours that will be on the district team will be substantial in the months that several people may be not here as we prepare to take their earned vacation time at a time before we launch a school year. So I think I want to be conservative and careful with funds, but for the fund amount, for the proportion that it could be problematic, I would lead toward your penny wise, pound foolish conversation. Is going to take a lot of time. And I shared with you, our priority is to make sure our policies are in good place and they're being implemented appropriately, and that there's good regulations and exhibits behind them, and that's where we have focused our time. If we're going to shift into an entire different piece, then that's the desire of the governing board. Then our focus and priority is going to shift in what we've been doing and how we're going to be doing it.
And I completely agree, and that's why I'd like some comparison. I don't want you to spend a lot of time on. I mean, I don't want you to spend a lot of time on the information. I need to visualize what one offers over the other, because I agree. I know that we get more than just policies from ASBA, but I don't know what else this other company even offers. So, I mean, if they only do policy, then yes, then that cost is going to be different, and I wouldn't want to put any of our staff through any of that. I just need to compare what the services are. I mean, what do we get, compare, and like I said, just a brief overview of an approximate extra $200 for the law. That's all I'm asking for. I don't want you to, for me.
I'm guessing they have that. The ASBA would have an information sheet that just shows, like, this is how much more you would pay as a non-member.
Right, it's something you can just look at one of their registration forms. I'm not asking to spend a lot of time on. I just need more of a comparison, because I really don't know what I'm comparing, and like you said, I don't know what I would be saving if we made a change. Between actual dollars to the vendor or dollars to our staff. And would we suffer in what we actually get out of it if we left ASBA? So I just don't know. I just want the comparison on what the two services do.
President Schultz, so by this agreement, this is just for the board docs and the policies, right?
This is for your platform. This is for your agreement for the policies and your board docs.
So this has nothing to do with the relationship with ASBA as far as membership and trainings and anything of that sort?
No, this is your policies and board docs.
There. Thank you.
Okay, can we go ahead?
Thank you. If this does move forward with being tabled, I just want to, Ms. Wade made a great comment of and taking in your information about the transition it would take and the time, and I do not want to waste any more time. I know everybody's working terribly hard just through each day. So it would be great to get that information, but I do want to make the comment. I've been to the law conference, and I believe the consensus from last year's law conferences, it wasn't really that great. So if we're getting mediocre information and that's what we're paying extra for and trying to hold on to for the reason to stay with them, then I would make sure that they understand we're not going to continue the service if you're going to give us mediocre conferences. You know, I've been to one years and years and years ago whenever I was board secretary, and it was great, and I was excited to learn, but at that time I didn't know what I didn't know. Also, I've been to the delegate assembly, and that was fantastic, and it was great to hear the perspectives of everyone, but again, I don't know if we didn't go and attend that, would that really be detrimental to our district? I'm sorry? Oh, okay. I did ask the question for sending the questions early of what % of their services do we use and how often? And unfortunately, and I know these questions take up your time, and in the responses, we use the resources as we needed. But if this does move forward being tabled, can we get a more detailed answer of what are you valuing and using exactly if you can? I know that's going to take up your time, Dr. Foley, but if we're truly going to make the right decision, I understand that the policies and the convenience and the calibration and everything you mentioned is 100% important, and I don't think any one of us disagrees with that. But what else are we getting out of ASBA, and are you finding that you are using and finding valuable to the operations of this district? I'm sorry, thank you.
Well, and if this is only the policy and board docs, which I was assuming it was ASBA, so maybe, shame on me. The way I read it was, this is only policy and only board docs.
Your policy, services, subscription agreements.
Okay, so yeah, then I think the only thing we would need to know, or I won't say we, I should say I, what is the cost if we stayed with board docs on our own? And what is this other offering? So just a small comparison, because if it's not all that, then don't spend all that time. But yeah, just a comparison, and what is board docs on our own if we got it, and kind of go from there.
We would also, sorry, board member, or President Schultz, the timeline of switching. Again, I recognize that it does not feel good making these decisions with a very tight timeline at all. The point is we don't want to lapse in anything because that causes far more problems than anything else. And I think all of these questions are valid because the cost and everything else, especially if this is separate from being a member or whatever else all that other stuff is. And if this does take time and how we progress for the next 4 years, I guess my biggest concern is in our efforts to try to save some of this, what is the switchover and the detriment that that could cause in the short interim? And I also recognize that it doesn't feel smart to financially live in that existence, but we are unfortunately in that position at the present moment. So with that information, if we have time to be able to say, okay, this is what board docs would cost us, and then at the next meeting, recognize and understand what that changeover would look like, is it a possibility or is there a lapse? Because if there's a lapse, I don't think the benefits outweigh the detriment in that cost, but then the benefit is we buy ourselves 4 years of time to come up with answers to all of these questions that take a ridiculous amount of time to do that, and we give you then years instead of days in order to be able to provide some of that info.
Completely agree with you on there. The thing is we're paying $6,100 right now for policies. If we're paying them $1,000 and this was $5,100, we're paying $6,100. If theirs is still $1,000, and board docs is, I'm just throwing a number out there, keeping it simple, is $3,000 for us to maintain on our own. Right there, we're saving $2,000 per year over the next 4 years, and I don't want to do that to you guys. But there is an overall cost to that too. So it's information, I guess, at this point. And yes, it's unfortunate. You've been trying to ask, and it's unfortunate the timing it's coming before us. For us to try and get more information.
So forgive me for not knowing this. So the other ASBA stuff is a whole different membership then? The delegate assembly and all that. So being a member and getting the member prices for those is a completely different entity. Okay. And is there a bundle? Like like when Cox used to do that, oh, if you drop this, and all of a sudden your prices went up, and you thought you were dropping a service. Is that how it works with ASBA? Like if we drop the policy services, is our other membership fee going to be different because of that? Do you know?
President Schultz, Vice President Anderson, don't want to speak out of turn. We will look at if we will provide additional information and be sure that we understand all the options.
I apologize.
No apologies.
Currently, ready.
President Schultz, isn't the ASBA membership individual-based? It's per person, isn't it? It's not district, it's per person. So technically, if we're not paying membership fees for us, we don't have a membership as board members. Yeah, so we would have to, the district would have to pay for our membership for us to get a discount. So for instance, we went to the first class that they offered for new board members. I don't think that was at a discounted rate because we weren't members. And any course offered after the fact, in order to qualify for the membership rate, we have to become members. So it's an individual membership.
Thank you.
Okay, so currently on the table is to table 8.5, approve 8.5, the approval of ASBA policy services renewal. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is denied, 0 to 5. And we will look for more information. Approved, I'm sorry. Yep, approved, approved, 0 to 5. Yes, we will table this until the June 7th meeting, pending more information regarding that. Moving on to 8.6, approval to increase. I make a motion to approve the increase the annual cumulative spend for vendors listed below on cooperative contracts over $100,000 for fiscal year 2022-2023.
Seconded.
Questions, comments, concerns?
This is 8.6. So I do have one item that's on there. Well, two items. There's Nearpods and there is Renaissance. My issue with Nearpods is it's about the whole child district-wide initiative, which promotes DEI, SEL, equitable classrooms, implicit bias in classrooms, restorative practices, restorative justice, pronoun shift, intro to equity, and I know that there are parents in this district that do not support this. And Nearpods falls under Renaissance. And so it's a major concern of mine as well. You know, some people might be okay with it. Some might not be. Some aren't okay with it. I believe that it's, you know, any curriculum that does this, I think, is divisive. It's also going to be used, if it's going to be used, continued use in our district, I think that there needs to be an opt-out option. Our purpose, again, is academics, and I think by implementing these ideologies, we're moving away from that, and we need to ensure that we stay with academics. And as far as, you know, Renaissance goes, I mean, their entire website's all about DEI, and, you know, they have their action. We have created a fully organized DEI culture that involves people throughout the organization and is embedded within every structure of Renaissance. Diversity to create a bias-free, equitable talent acquisition and employee development process. Equity to promote educational equity by ensuring our product adhere to strict guidelines for content appropriateness and reflect the diversity of today's classroom. To create an inclusive and attractive company culture for underrepresented employees. I know in our district, I hope there are no represented employees. So I want to ensure that we, again, concentrate on academics and with organizations. I think at some point, a lot of these organizations had good intentions. And I think that the focus has changed, and all these educational organizations are shifting to these ideologies, and it's pretty unfortunate to see because I think it creates a division between our community when we're going with, one sort of belief and these ideologies, and then we're ignoring a whole separate group of people. And when we bring it back to academics and ensure that we're concentrating on academics, that involves everybody. You want to talk inclusivity. How much more inclusive can we be if we're paying attention to academics and not these ideologies? That's all.
Okay, excuse me. Board member Van Hook. We've had several discussions with the Ed Services team. So when the decision was made this year to provide the resource of Nearpod, the training focuses on the Arizona State standards and using those academic resources embedded within that system. So our teachers go through extensive training. Our technology coaches, Valerie Thomas and Janie Ramirez, have done most of this training. Dr. Treat's involved to make sure that we're clearly communicating. The teachers are raving about what a great resource this is in terms of science and math and ELA. So there are always things out there that somebody could go grab from YouTube or anything. But as professionals, we are training our teachers to use this resource for academic purposes. And the components within it where you grab the standard and it takes you to the lessons, it's pretty incredible. It's a really good resource. I'm hearing your concerns, but that's not the purpose for us using that.
But because Renaissance is so big on these, my fear is that these lessons include these same visions that Renaissance has. So are we teaching, with these lessons that they have, are we teaching DEI? And ultimately, these are all part of, we claim we don't have CRT, it's in our district, but this is a part of critical race theory. So do these curriculums contain these ideologies?
So the components of Nearpod, we have told the teachers how to access the lessons aligned to their standards, academic standards. They've also been trained, that's something before you use it. And with anything, any lessons, curriculum, books, anything we use, parents can opt out, and we'll give them an alternative activity. But the feedback that we're receiving on this particular resource is extremely positive.
Okay. So there will be an opt-out form available for,
Well, we always have an opt-out process that our parents can use. So that goes for everything.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think the Renaissance piece about the assessment package, I don't know if we want to wait till, what is it, 8.8? Because I have Marcus Berkshire here to discuss the assessment pieces within that.
I mean, I can speak on that too. I plan on speaking on that too.
I know, but
So if I
President
may.
Schultz, do you want to come back to that component after these other items here? 8.7, I don't know if we're done with 8.6.
It's still
Right.
Renaissance.
Yes, we'll have to, right, sorry. 8.6 is what we're talking about now.
Right.
So we have to stay with this one before we move on to 8.7. I'd also like to say, I believe our teachers are following the standards
Yes,
and
ma'am.
teaching our kids what the standards are. And I have faith in our teachers and what they do in the district and never have had a question.
I unfortunately have seen instances where teachers have crossed the line. And I've had this conversation with Dr. Foley. And, you know, I want to ensure that, as I've stated before, once you teach something, you can't unteach it. So yes, we want to ensure that teachers are following the law, staying within state standards, but, you know, with what I've seen, that's not 100% of the case. But, I mean, I would love it for it to be, but it's not always the case. So parents are concerned.
So Board Member Van Hook, if there occurs a situation that we need to address, then we work with administration to address it. So I'm not going to tell you, but every person is perfect all of the time. But our job is to make sure we train and we support our teachers on what they're teaching and how they're teaching it. And if somebody has a misstep, then our job is to support and improve. So,
Which happens in any organization, in any profession, that there's people that, you know, that happens. But the majority, I feel, sticking to the standards. Mrs. Wade.
President Schultz, I'm very happy to hear the positive feedback. I think it is important to recognize that teachers are the ones who have to implement this curriculum, and having something in place that makes it to where it is easy for us to see what state standard this aligns to. So from a data perspective, my kids are not doing well on this unit, this specific item, and it gives me the opportunity of being able to look at that. I also think it's important for us to keep in mind that things like equity aren't a danger. The idea of creating a situation in which kids who might have other or differing environments in general in order to be able to process with that. And so, like, for me, from my perspective of giving the professional courtesy to the individuals who are using this day in and day out, I think that carries a lot of weight on how you manage your classroom and the curriculum that you are responsible for implementing and everything else. Considering I've had to work with Galileo and the individuals who have used those types of things and understanding the programs and how much we have seen positive changes, I think it's important for us to keep in mind the fact that overwhelmingly there is positive feedback for this program, giving the idea that if teachers are enjoying it, it is user-friendly, et cetera, for both teachers and students, the likelihood of us using it and helping to increase those academics is really valuable.
One thing I didn't mention is kids can't go in there and just pick anything they want. The teachers have to look at the standards, select it, and assign it to the kids. So I think that's really important, and I do trust our teachers.
Thank you, Ms. Richards, and that's a great point. I've used Nearpod, and I understand. Yeah, it's a great platform for making interactive lessons, and whenever teachers are absent, I know it's used quite often because you can still continue learning, and they can run. You can tell the program to run and make it move forward and quiz them, and anyway. But of course, I use Kahoot. And quizzes and Quizlet and everything. I use them all. It's great programs. But of course, I even took a screenshot of a Kahoot, which I thought was just a great thing. It was, you know, somebody made it because you're looking at what other people are making, and yeah, it had something I found hateful and you know, but as a trained teacher and as my expectations, I said that's terrible, and making sure I'm reading through everything, and that's what I would hope. And that I know is happening, and we are following through and making sure that students and parents feel comfortable speaking out if they see or hear anything that they feel like is against what our district is wanting for our students. But I would just say all these platforms. I've searched for lessons, like, hey, if it's already made, boy, would I like to use it. And there has been garbage that has showed up, and I know it goes against whatever the district that I work in wouldn't want shown. So as long as we keep training, and again, keep parents and students feeling comfortable reporting or just saying, hey, that doesn't seem to go with our curriculum. I think that's great, and I think this district has done a good job with that.
All those in favor of approving 8.6? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. Moving on to 8.7, the approval of intergovernmental agreement between Greater Phoenix Educational Management Council and AZ Education Management Council and Higley Unified for fiscal years 2023 to 2028. Questions, comments, concerns?
President Schultz, Dr. Foley, if we are utilizing this for laws and policies, because one of the responses back that we got was we use them for, you know, for laws, and they keep us up to date on policies. Would that make them like a third organization that we utilize for that purpose, other than ASBA?
President Schultz, for Member Van Hook, a different context. One of those things is, and you'll notice that this is a collection of typically smaller districts, not always, because there are some larger districts on there, but these are districts that don't have internal, many districts have their own lobbyists, they have their own legal services in addition to the trust that they use. What this particular organization, for instance, does is affiliation with them keeps you current on things that are happening on the Senate floor. When we don't end up hearing about it after the fact. Let me give you an example. During COVID, prior to the district being a part of GuppiMec, we were learning about things that were happening from the governor's office as they were being announced to the public when a new executive order came to be. And so what a lot of the new superintendents at the time I was stepping into this role across the state said, you need to belong, your district needs to belong. Our consultant at the time said, there's a resource here that most districts utilize that really helps them. And what's beautiful is this organization has people who work directly every week, every other week, they meet with Arizona Department of Education. They are who the governor's office goes to first. They have someone sitting in with bills coming out that says, this is in the House, this is in the Senate, this failed, so that we as educators can be monitoring things as they are happening and respond to it appropriately prior to the advisories coming out to us. This is on the boots, real. These are people who are educators who are monitoring things that are going to impact educational leaders so that we can forecast it and respond ahead of time. The reason I found out about this is I saw that some districts were releasing communications about how they were going to respond to an executive order literally at the same time it hit the public. We, prior to having this, were just learning about it at the same time. So being that we are a small district, our bench is not deep. I don't have multiple assistant superintendents or a set of in-house. We used to have an in-house attorney. Don't have that anymore. We don't have lobbyists. Being a part of an organization where someone is constantly providing that information for the district is helpful. We would hope that the governing board would want to support the district leadership in the business services department, in the ed services department, and all the assistant superintendents with information that's coming right out of the, I've been able to participate on advisory committees that were being formed before they were even out there because Guppy Mech knew it was aware and I was able to apply right away. So if we would hope that we would want to continue those services for professional development. There's monthly meetings, there's the ability to get newsletters. I will share with you that there are very few resources that exist like this for educators. So this would be something that we would hope that the governing board would support for us to have as professionals trying to forecast and respond to situations in Arizona and education. From the Senate to the committee floors, there's someone who provides an update. We know about it before we read about it in the newspaper.
Okay. And as far as for instance, I get, as soon as an executive order goes out or any bills are signed or vetoed, I get a notification.
We end up getting it usually 48 hours beforehand because, for instance, the governor's group or Tom Horn's group would go to the leaders of Guppy Mech and say, here's what I'm getting ready to put out there to your leaders. Can you make them aware? So this is one of the educational groups that ends up helping keep educators aware before hearing about it when it's finally decided. And we know what, we understand what senators are talking about and what's being proposed and when it dies, it allows us to just kind of track what might be coming to us in the next policy advisories so that we can forecast appropriately.
Got it.
Yeah, it also allows us to give input and allows us to be on committees because it's very hard for us to be, we can't be on the Senate floor. I can't be at every, and wouldn't be invited to every meeting with, with Tom Horn, but this group does, and they can provide updates about the conversations that are happening. So for us, it's an invaluable resource that if we didn't have, we would be relying on asking our peer districts to provide us what was sent to them so that we could have access to it, which is what we were doing before. And so, quite honestly, our consultant said, with the limited staffing you have with people who do this as a full-time job for districts, you need a resource like that.
Thank you.
Anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to 8.8, authorization of expenditure Renaissance assessment package. I make a motion to authorize the authorization of expenditure Renaissance assessment package. Christina, I think. Mrs. Reese, excuse me. Okay, questions, comments, concerns?
President Schultz.
Yes.
So as I stated above in 8.6, here it discusses Renaissance DNA and then Renaissance Fast Bridge. DNA is pretty much data collection, contains student profiles, summarizes pertinent demographics, assessments, grades, It contains a live proctoring tool, and it uses data across multiple platforms. It tracks student behavior, participation, risk level, and if you go to the website, it provides a sample of the type of labeling on students. So it could contain notes that the student is very pleasant. It can say that the student has no issues or mild issues. And so teachers could put, scores on certain areas of the student. The concern is this could be, possible data mining that many parents have issues with. As far as FastBridge, this says accelerate learning with K through 12 screening, progress monitoring, assessments for academics, social emotional behavior with intervention recommendations used by schools as a curriculum source. It falls under Renaissance. It pushes social emotional learning, whole child, LGBTQ, BLM, equity, social justice, reading, math, and social emotional behavior. It's data-driven, utilizing MTSS, and it monitors growth and promotes equity. It sorts the report by gender, ethnicity, etc. So this again is concerning to parents, and districts like Mesa utilize it, and they do have an opt-out form on their website for parents to be able to opt their children out of it. So if we are going to continue to use it, I would hope that there's an opt-out form for parents to do just that.
I think that
Board
Mrs.
member-
Richard,
oh,
sorry,
Go
said
ahead.
previously that there is an opt-out process for everything. If you don't want your kid to read a book about dogs, you can opt out to read not read about dogs. There's everything an opt-out. I get a form for everything. I get a form for reading a book that might have a word I don't care about, but is in there that someone else might care about or something.
So President Schultz, Board Member Van Hook, I have asked Marcus Berkshire to come and explain the components that we are requesting to use and why, because there are multiple components in there. And other districts have used things that we are not going to use. So I'm going to let him take over here. Marcus.
President Schultz, Member Van Hoek. The products that we're bringing to the board tonight, DNA is an assessment platform. What the product that you were describing is part of the Illuminate suite of products that was purchased by Renaissance, and that product is a product called EduClimber. DNA, FastBridge, those products will flow into EduClimber, and it is used for MTSS purposes, that kind of thing, in other districts. We are not purchasing EduClimber. The only thing that we're looking at is DNA, which, if you're familiar with Galileo, DNA is a beefed up, much better product than Galileo. We've used Galileo in the district for approximately 15 years, and it hasn't changed since the first day that it was introduced in the district. DNA provides multiple opportunities for teachers to provide different ways for kids to be assessed, both formatively as well as summatively. It's a standards-based product, so as a teacher, I can go in to the item bank and say, I want items on this particular standard. I want to filter those by DOK level, which is the complexity of the question. They mirror what our kids will be taking for the state assessments very well. It also has predictive capabilities, just like with what we had with Galileo, to tell us how our kids are going to perform on the state tests. So that's the DNA product. Its reporting capability does allow us to really dive down and look at individual student performance, subgroup performance, which is very important for us because that's part of our letter grades from the state, is looking at how our subgroups perform and how they improve. So the ability to pull those demographics and look at individual kids and individual subgroups and how they perform on not only our district benchmarks, but individual teacher assessments helps guide them in their instruction moving forward and helping kids and meet them where they need. The other product, Bassbridge, does have a tool called Sabres in it. We are not using Sabres. So the only two products that we'll be using in Bassbridge will be the universal screeners in both reading and math. And those are available for K-12. And what those really do is they provide us with basically a pre-assessment of where our kids are and what skill deficits they may have in math or reading, which allow us to intervene with those students early on before they're failing. That's the idea with an instrument like Bassbridge, is it allows us to really hone in on where a child may have a specific skill deficit. For example, if they take the fast track reading, they may come back and it might say they're struggling with phonemic awareness. And then it's going to provide us with information on what we can do as a teacher to address that particular skill deficit. Again, the goal being that if we can address it now and early on before they're failing, then they're going to have better chance for success moving on. So again, the Sabres piece, that is part of the product. However, we have the ability to disable it, and it is disabled. Teachers will not see it. They cannot assign it to kids. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? All those in favor of 8.8 authorization of expenditure Renaissance assessment package? Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. Items for future agenda. This agenda item is for the governing board to have running record for potential items to be placed on a future agenda item. There will be no discussion on the substance, merits, or issues relating to the proposed agenda item. Any proposed agenda items?
I think,
Mrs. Anderson.
Thank you, President Schultz. I think we found a little bit of a weakness in the communication of the science book adoption. Just keep working, or if we can get an update and follow our strategic plan of how that's working with communication for parents. And I guess, I don't know if that's a future agenda item or something that we can put in an update of any plans we have to stick to our strategic plan to communicate for communication. Thank you.
Can we add it as like an information item as far as like an update to?
Yes, this would
what's
be the
been
time
done?
for just future agenda items. So if we wanted to add as an information item, then we
Yeah.
can ask Cabinet to add as an information item on a future agenda, our communication.
I'd like to be able to add, one of the speakers tonight mentioned brain pop. I'd like to be able to add that as a discussion item.
Okay. I remember that. All right. I'd like to move that we adjourn the meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. I just want to say congratulations to the class of 2023, and we hope you all have a great summer. Thank you.